gentlemen, this is the Select Board meeting for February 27th, 2023. We will begin tonight in executive session. We're scheduled to come out of executive session at 6:30, but Mr. Clerk, if you could please read the motion.
It's not a motion.
We have the
Move the
motion.
Select Board vote to enter into executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws 30, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 2, to conduct strategy and preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Finance Director, Fire Chief, Deputy Fire Chief. Purpose 7, to comply with any general or special law, specifically General Law, Chapter 214, Section 1B, Right to Privacy, General Law, Chapter 41, Section 111F. And executive session number 6 under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body, 12 Robinson Road in Nagog Hill Orchard. Select Board will adjourn to executive session and will reconvene in open session after the executive session is closed.
I do so declare. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Ms. Napoli. We will have a roll call vote. Mr. Rombacher?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
Ms. Napoli?
Aye.
Chair's in favor. Motion carries 5-0. We'll see you in about an hour. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. We've just returned from executive session. This is the Select Board meeting of February 27th, 2023. We will begin tonight, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Clerk.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. A brief preview of tonight's agenda. Department updates from Planning Board, Open Space and Recreation Committee, the Town Clerk, the Sewer Department, and the Police Department, followed by public input and members' updates. We then have a joint meeting with the Community Preservation Committee to discuss CPC funding. Discussion of the RFI, which we sent out for the senior affordable housing at Shattuck Street, sewer working group meeting minute discussion, and discussion regarding some open space chapter land. Review, hey, it's time for our annual town meeting. Discussion about our warrant articles. It just seems like we just finished a town meeting, but there we are. And then town administrator update, a contract with the Vertex Company, a contract with LLB, and finally minutes. So, Mr. Administrator, if you'd like to begin with mail.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. A few things in the packet. The first one is we received our annual letter from Xfinity with filing its Form 500, which they're required to do under Mass General Law, Chapter 166A, Section 10, which just notifies of any outages and how they responded to them. The second item is, there's also some programming change in there from Comcast on some channel changes. We also received in your packet a letter from the Neshoba Valley that we need to appoint an associate member for the Neshoba Valley Technical District School Committee. So that's going to be planned at the school committee meeting in advertised for, when is that? March 31st. So we will be doing a joint meeting with the school committee. It's the town moderator will chair that meeting to appoint an alternate member or associate member. Next item is the public meeting on the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan. That's going to be on March 23rd from 6 to 8. That's going to be at Littleton Town Hall in room 103. The next item we have is a reminder about receiving public notifications. So we put this up here for those at home that want to be notified and kept informed. Please sign up for our notification system. And the last thing, Mr. Chair, is we still have 5 committees where we're still looking for some committee members, the Cultural Council, Master Plan and Implementation Committee, the Permanent Municipal Building Committee, Sustainability Committee, and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have the town planner to discuss the job description for assistant town planner. Good evening.
All right, good evening. Thank you very much. Maureen Toohill, Town Planner. You have in front of you a job description for Assistant Town Planner. The request is for your approval of that job description as a grade 10. Personnel Advisory Committee reviewed, or 2 members of the PAC reviewed the job description, and it came out as a very high 9. I'm concerned that perhaps the job description doesn't reflect the urgency and the political nature of a lot of the aspects of what Planning Department deals with. But I would very much like to see this process move forward, and with your approval, we can start advertising the position right away.
Thank you. Comments from the board?
Is there anyone from the Personal Advisory Committee, I guess, here?
Looks like not. Michelle?
There's not tonight, but I do want to echo what Maren said, that it did come out as a high 9, and in keeping with internal equity, if you look at positions that are currently on a grade 10, you have the Assistant Cemetery Superintendent, the Assistant Conservation Agent, and the Assistant Town Clerk, so it does fit in. If you did decide to move it to a 10, it fits in with what's there currently.
Thank you. Anyone want to comment on this? I mean, my personal view is I'm hesitant to overrule the Personnel Advisory Committee. I don't think that it's necessarily the Select Board's place to do it. I don't doubt that the position is probably closer to a 10, and it does sound like it's consistent with the other assistants in town, but I wonder if we should recommend strongly that the PAC regrade this rather than doing it ourselves. I would be more comfortable with that, I suppose.
So we came to a high 9, as Michelle said, and really, I brought it forward and recommended the grade 10. I think going back to the Personnel Advisory Committee is another delay in the process. So, like Michelle said, in keeping with our equity and other positions, it's my recommendation that we just move forward at this point with a 10. Personnel Advisory Committee is just that, it's advisory. And other than that, you look for the professionals that you hire to also weigh in on it. And we weighed in on it, and we thought collectively that 10, and quite honestly, I don't even know if a 10 is going to be enough.
Okay.
I'll jump in, Mr. Chair, if I can.
Yes.
So the difference between a high 9 and a low 10 is not terribly consequential from a budgetary standpoint. And if we bring somebody into the high 9, they're going to hit that ceiling, so it's going to require us to probably address that at some point.
Right.
Not too far down the road, so maybe it might be under the advice of the professionals that we have here today, might just be worth our while to
Okay.
give them that upward mobility.
If I could just make a comment back to that, to put your mind at ease, there is enough money in the budget to cover the rest of this year if we were to hire in April, as well as FY '24 at a grade 10.
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion. I'll move that the Select Board grades the Assistant Town Planner at a grade 10.
Second.
Just take my job now.
Yeah, I just get to it.
Any further discussion? The motion's been made and seconded.
I kind of agree with Matthew. I'm a little leery to do this because it seems like it's outside of our normal purview, but I do think the position should be a 10, but I feel uncomfortable that we're making it a 10 versus, we've never graded any other
Yeah, we have.
position.
Well, we've,
Well, when they came back, we didn't change them from the Personnel Advisory Committee, when they redid the grid. So,
that's a little different. I think here, where we don't have a personnel board anymore to do these things for us, even then, the Select Board would grade outside of those recommendations, but we are the grading authority. Something that a classification authority cannot do is look at market. That's not their job. It's look at the job and grade it appropriately per the
Based on
standard.
fact.
So this one, I think, and I looked at it, I'm not just coming into this cold. believe me, I'll follow a classifier or whatever they grade. This particular one, and after consulting with the reasons why and looking at it, we are going to have a really hard time at a grade 9 to fill this position. That's my look at this, but I'm with you. I hate going against, why do we have the advisory committee and HR and everything, but it sounds like you both recognize the difficulty we'll have filling this position. So
Okay,
that's why I made the motion. I wouldn't have done it otherwise.
all right. In that case, I guess I'll go with the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Good luck.
Open Space and Recreation Planning Committee. Is this you, Anthony?
Myron.
Oh. Hey, oh, hi.
No,
Hi,
no,
yeah.
I'm sorry. It's Alicia. I'm sorry. I got the wrong one, Myron.
Got it, Myron, come on.
I was thinking hazard mitigation. I'm sorry, Myron.
Is,
I can.
Yeah, you want to take it?
that
is there
one.
no one from
So,
Parks and Rec
okay.
here? Okay.
So, the board, Mr. Chair, you have a memo in your packet from Alicia Day regarding the process we followed to get out our open space and recreation plan. The board, we went out and solicited bids from, I believe it was about seven firms, and only one response came in. This is from the firm of Dodson and Flinker under our not to exceed limit of $30,000. So recommendation from Alicia is that the board authorize the town administrator to execute a contract for $29,750 with Dodson and Finker to conduct the open space and recreation plan. I would note, and maybe Maren can speak to this, but this was one of the firms that Maren had recommended who would work with the town on, during the master planning process on our open space needs. So, in fact, actually, I have a little map with that has their name above it of all those open spaces in town. So they actually would probably be well-suited to assisting us in this need. And so the request of the board is to, again, authorize the town administrator to move forward with the contract.
Thank you. Any comments or discussion of this?
Warren's okay with it?
All right, take a motion then.
I'm gonna do this one together.
You got it, thank you.
Move the select board authorize the town administrator to execute a contract for $29,750 with Dodson and Flinker LLC to conduct the open space and recreation plan.
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Mark. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, Town Clerk, dedication of the annual report. Good evening.
So several weeks ago, I came before you and gave you a list of those persons that we felt were worthy of having 2022 dedication. The only change that we had discussed after that meeting was changing Ed Howard from being part of it to a special recognition. So still being in that part of it, but just changing him to a special recognition. So I'm wondering how, after you had a chance to read it, what your thoughts were, the persons that were given to you.
Anyone?
I think we got some.
I mean, I obviously don't know all of them, but the ones I did know deserve it. So are you just going to put Ed at the end
Yeah, so
with a separate heading?
Yeah, it'll have a separate, and it'll say
That
special
that
recognition.
Sounds fine.
Yeah.
Any other comments,
They're all deserving.
questions?
No, these
Yeah,
are
I
great.
think
These are great.
I think it's great.
All right. Do we need a motion for this?
Yeah, it would be helpful, and just to accept the recommendations of the town clerk.
We don't have one written up, but
Right.
Yeah.
Move that the select board vote to accept the recommendations of the town clerk for the dedications for the 2022 annual report.
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Cindy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
All right, sewer departments, project funding guarantees. Good evening.
Corey?
All right, thanks for having me tonight. I was hoping to first give a quick update on the sewer project and then jump into the letter that's in front of you. So there's 4 separate contracts associated with this large infrastructure project. All 4 of them are out to bid, or actually we opened bids on one of them just last Wednesday. That was the effluent discharge contract that came in at $2.4 million, which is a good sign because that's what it was estimated at 2 years ago, almost exactly. And everyone here I think knows what inflation has done to construction costs over the past 2 years, so we expected it to come in quite a bit higher than that previous estimate. So that was good news. But because of that inflation, estimates for the rest of the project bring us to a total estimated cost of $46.7 million. If you include all the associated water main replacement work that we added, that water main work will be financed separately through the water department. But without that water main work, we're still looking at a total estimated cost of $40.7 million. So that's a huge increase over the $31.3 million estimate that we were working with when we went to town meeting to get the borrowing authorization almost 2 years ago. So hopefully we continue to get lucky as we open bids like we did last week for the other 3 contracts, and hopefully the prices come in much lower than that estimate. But if you'll recall, we're planning to finance this project through a state revolving fund loan or an SRF loan. And so these SRF loans are issued by the Clean Water Trust, Massachusetts Clean Water Trust, and they're administered by the Mass DEP, specifically for drinking water and wastewater infrastructure projects. The benefit of these loans is that they come with a 1.5% interest rate, which you're not going to beat these days. But in exchange for that very low interest rate, there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape. And one of the boxes that we have to check with the SRF program is for bond counsel to certify that all of the funding necessary for the project has been appropriated, not just the total amount that we're borrowing through them, but all of the costs associated with the project, regardless of whether we're borrowing it from them or not. So that's why we're here tonight. So Governor Baker's economic development bill allocated $8 million to the town of Littleton to help support infrastructure that's necessary to allow the 550 King Street development to happen. And we're asking you to sign a letter dedicating those funds to the sewer project, because without them we have a $9.4 million funding gap, and their SRF program would deny us the loan if we can't certify to them that we have all the funding necessary for the full project, which would probably mean going back to town meeting and borrowing an additional $8 million. So that would be a total borrowing of $39.3 million instead of $31.3 million. And at that point, having lost the SRF loan, the interest rate is anybody's guess, but probably upwards of 5.5% instead of 1.5%. So if you factor in that extra $8 million in borrowing and a 5.5% interest rate instead of 1.5%, you end up with $34 million in extra borrowing costs over the 30-year life of the loan. So it's a huge financial impact if we don't get this SRF loan. That equates to an extra $27,000 on the betterment fee for a single-family home that would connect to the sewer system. And for the 550 King Street project, their betterment fee would increase by $24.5 million. So it's pretty clear, I think, from the numbers that it's in everyone's best interest to finance this project through the SRF loan, which means demonstrating the bond counsel and the SRF program that the full estimated project costs are available for the project. So unfortunately, the SRF program, they won't wait until we open bids to see the real numbers. They need to work off the engineering cost estimates right now, which shows that $9.4 million funding gap. And then, you might be asking the question, what about the other $1.4 million? We're just talking about the 8 right now. Well, we recently got another MassWorks grant on top of the previous $1.5 million MassWorks grant, which helps close that gap as well. So between the $8 million from the economic development bill plus the new $1.5 million MassWorks grant covers that $9.4 million funding gap.
When are we required to, when does the SRF loan close, I guess, or like, when do we have to ask for the money?
Well, I mean, it's been a long, drawn-out process for over a year now, but it's already stretched beyond what they would normally allow. There's a lot of different, like I said, boxes that need to be checked. We've checked the vast majority of them now. The final one is the permit from Mass DEP, which we're expecting in the next couple of days, and this piece right here that demonstrates that we have the full funding amount necessary for the project. So there's not a hard date per se, but we're way past what they would normally allow already.
All right.
So when we met with the developers of 550 King Street in the end of January, we discussed this $8 million and said we were going to wait until after the bids came back. So why are we not waiting 2 more weeks, 3 weeks until
Well,
the bids
it's-
come back before we allocate this?
Yeah, well, it'd be a little over a month. So the final bid opening will be March 22nd. The SRF program will, I don't think they'll wait that long. They've been calling me every day asking me where this final piece is. I think what we're asking for tonight, from the letter, is we're asking for you to sign a letter indicating that $8 million is available for the project. Once the bids come in, there could be a different conversation about what happens with that. If the bids come in lower, maybe that money gets spread differently. But right now, we need to demonstrate that, based on the engineering cost estimates, that money's available to the sewer project.
I guess I'm a little concerned because my recollection of the language in the earmark was for 550 King Street, not the sewer necessarily. And so I guess the other question I would have is, we just had a town meeting and we knew we were short. Like, why didn't we ask, why aren't we asking for funding then?
Yeah, no,
You know?
it's a good question. A lot of people have asked that particular question, and that goes back to the sort of red tape that I mentioned with the SRF program. They require any local borrowing authorization to have been completed by June 30th, 2022. So getting a new borrowing authorization now would not help anything with getting the SRF loan. It'd help us finance it outside the loan, but not within their
They
loan.
wouldn't consider it as part of the
No,
funding?
it's not even just their rules, it's actually the federal government's rules. It's federal money.
I'll speak a little bit.
Yeah.
I did, actually took the day off today to get myself smart on this. So, I was looking at, I had the same questions. Mine was more of a legal concern, because I went in and I looked at the economic bill that Charlie Baker had signed in last year. I wanted to see the exact language, and my concern was it didn't mention sewers, so it was very specific to the King Street development. Okay, well, that's still a pretty broad statement. So I had asked the team to reach out to Myers and Harrington, our attorney, and just get the legal, and that's what you see on this sheet that was handed out to us, a legal opinion on how this can work so that we can actually, first of all, use the money for this. And this is kind of how the attorneys get back to us. In that, they also asked Nick, the general manager, obviously, to write a letter exactly requesting on how that money would be utilized for that project along in the King Street district. So that being said, what got me was it became a math problem at the end of the day, and where the $24.5 million saved in interest to the Lapoli companies for the work that would have to be done in that area, to me, far outweighs $8 million that we potentially would use due to the interest that we would have to go out for more money. So I went back and forth on this, but when I really got down to the numbers made sense. Now, whether that's been conveyed to the Lapoli companies, I'm not sure. I think that those discussions probably need to be at the table monthly to really iron these out so that there's a clear understanding of how we can best work to develop that part. Because as you know, a lot goes into this outside of just the simple infrastructure of putting in commercial up front, some apartments in the back. There's a lot that has to happen up front. But I think the dynamic of the money saved off the interest of this loan, to me, made it much more palatable. One thing I would say, because I'm not comfortable, and I don't know what the rest of the board is comfortable, just without knowing the final project cost, that's a huge variable, and I know Mark, you just brought it up. I would like to put in here to inform you of the select board's intent to dedicate up to $8 million. Because if that's not the cost, then we should probably reserve the right to retain that money to do, something else. So, on the common infrastructure, for instance, and things like that. So that would be my only change to this request. I know everyone else has dug into this differently. That was just what I did meet with Light and Water today. I have met independently with Lapoli companies just to get an idea of what their thoughts are. You guys are very far apart on this piece of it. But at the end of the day, I don't know how much of this, what I found out today, has been discussed with them. I would ask that you continue to meet as regularly as possible. There's a lot of other ways that we can help. In this 10 years of a project that I think we're going to see many more grants and many other opportunities for monies that's going to help on both sides. I would also ask that the reconciliation of a lot of this stuff, that your accounting piece meets with the town's finance team, I almost want to say monthly while this project's going on, so that we're very clear on what numbers, because I know in the past, this would be on FinCom and even more recently, that they've had discrepancies with your numbers and their numbers, and we don't need that on a project this size. So I would ask that you guys try to meet monthly just to reconcile those numbers and make sure that we're very clear going forward.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
I'm uncomfortable with this. We had a meeting, I sat in the meeting with the Lapoli companies on January 30th. There was no sense of urgency that we had to sign the SRF loan now. There was the discussion of this $8 million, yes, but it wasn't that we had to dedicate it now. There was the discussion that we would talk about the $8 million after the bids came in. March 15th was the date that was set at that meeting. So there was no mention of an urgency for any of this now. I don't understand what the urgency is now versus waiting another month. I'm not saying that we're not going to dedicate this. I just don't think we need, there was no mention of the urgency then. I don't understand what the sudden urgency is. What changed in the past month that all of a sudden we have to do this?
There was
now versus
But there was,
March 17th.
there was an expectation on behalf of the SRF. We're basically at 9 months extended at this point. Was it
Pretty
last
much,
June?
yeah.
May, something like that. So there was an extension, and from what I understand from talking to Corey, is that SRF reached out and said, we need this.
Yeah.
We need this by Wednesday?
As soon as possible,
Tuesday,
yeah.
tomorrow, or Wednesday?
Yeah, this week.
They wanted it last week. We knew we were meeting today, so that's why it's on the agenda tonight, which they granted us, okay, if you're gonna have a meeting on Monday night, can we get the letter on Tuesday? So although I was at the same meeting you were at on the 30th, Mark, and there was conversation around this, and I think that we collectively will all benefit from it. I'm not sure that this is exactly what Lapoli Development expected, and I don't think it's what any of us expected. I think adding the language that Mr. Wilson just offered up to put in up to gives some control back to us, I guess, if that money's not needed, to your point, Corey. If we open the bids on the 22nd of March and we come in and that's not needed, then we exercise the up to. And I think that's a good compromise. I did ask for those numbers as well, as far as the interest rate, and I appreciate you crunched those really quickly for us, and I do appreciate you bringing those tonight. I mean, to save $34 million in borrowing as a resident, I'd say, nice job, thank you for doing that.
24 million.
34 million in the project.
Overall, yeah.
But
Correct.
550 King Street developer
24 specifically for
is,
that
because
part
of
of
the
the
size of their part of the project,
72%.
they would save about $24.5
Yeah.
million in interest alone.
Right.
So that's pretty significant, and it's not ideal. I hate having to, having a gun to our heads and having to make a decision.
That's the worst part.
Based, it is. It stinks. But they have kind of been allowing us to kick this can, and it's kind of before us now. And I think that we, because there is that opportunity for savings. I mean, any one of us that has a loan, any kind of, whether it's on our home or what have you, we know that to buy a house right now versus buying a house 2 years ago at 2%, it's pretty significant. You're paying that much more for that property over the the amortization of the loan. So I with the caveat that we add in after the word dedicate before the $8 million amount, the words up to, I'd be comfortable moving forward with this letter tonight.
Ms. Napoli?
Can I just say something through the chair real quick, Cindy?
Sure.
Just, did you actually receive the attorneys?
I have not seen that, no.
All right, so that, there's some discussion in there of specifics on how that money, the opinion of the town attorney, how that money can be used in the King Street project.
Based upon the Chapter 268 forward bill language.
So it does speak to that. So I just wanted to make sure that this discussion after this, that you're comfortable with the language because that's kind of what we will, yeah. I think you guys
Ms.
are
Napoli?
done. Thank you.
I just, so, I guess my question is, what is the point of putting in up to 8 million, as opposed to just dedicating 8 million?
If the project comes in at less than they expected, we're going to spend the other funds before this.
This is the first money that comes back to us if the project is
But I
under
guess
budget.
that my question is, why wouldn't we put the full 8 million towards the sewer
We may,
component of the
Be-
project?
but it just gives us that
Because
opportunity.
Because it wasn't dedicated to the sewer, it was dedicated to 550 King Street.
The allocation from the state.
Correct.
However,
earmark.
we as a board took a vote that we would dedicate.
No, we didn't.
No, that was for the MassWorks grant, not for the earmark. That was a different vote.
What was the grant we applied to for $19 million?
MassWorks.
That was MassWorks, and we got
So
$1.5
this is
million, I think,
something
for that.
Yeah.
We got
This is the
$1.5
forward
million
bill.
for that.
This is an economic development bill.
This is the earmark.
It's
Okay.
specifically, stated economic development for King Street, development of King Street project.
Okay.
So that's kind of a loose term, and I think it was meant to be that way.
King Street Common project.
King Street Common project. So I think that,
King Street Common
Well, you know what's
development.
created confusing is that 550 King Street's now called
Right, right.
King Street Commons Project. I think that's
It's-
creating
it's
some.
I think it was
Definitely more than
lowercase c, frankly.
It's what?
Semantics a little bit, but I think it was lowercase c. I think it was the King Street
Common.
Common, lowercase c, development.
yeah.
What was
It
it?
wasn't the marketing King Street Common all uppercase.
No, I'm just talking about like on the planning board website and everything. That's what they call,
Yeah.
that's what everybody's referring it to. I think it's causing confusion.
Yep.
As far as.
Good point.
Yeah, so that was my point. I don't know. I think we should share this language that we received with town council, with the commissioners. I don't see the point of up to, but I don't
So
know.
I have a problem voting for something with a gun to my head, right?
Well-
If this has been known for months that this is coming on.
It
and this
hasn't
is-
been known for months. It was last Thursday, we got the request from bond counsel and the SRF folks, last Thursday. As Chuck
Which is Mass
stated-
DEP.
Which is Mass DEP.
Right.
Which Chuck stated, we didn't have a meeting, that's why it's today. It was last Thursday, not months.
But you've had the budget and you've had the estimates for
This is-
long,
this
for
is-
for longer than
This is
that.
not our request. This is bond council request and the SRF people. This is not the commissioners, this is not Chloe Godfrey. There's a request coming from DEP last Thursday, and that's what started this whole thing. So, the language actually reads, and I'll quote it right from chapter 268, the Acts of 2022, states that not less than $8 million shall be expended for the town of Littleton for the Littleton Common King Street development. Nowhere does it ever mention any specific property. It's the town of Littleton for the King Street, which starts way down here, by the way, all the way up to the common. And the project's called the Littleton Common Sewering Project.
Yeah, we can get all hung up on all kinds of semantics,
So,
all
so
different
so
names.
I think that like that may be true, but we all know where that money came from, and we all know to what that money was dedicated, I believe. I don't think that earmark would have been present if we hadn't been talking to Sal and Sal hadn't been talking to the administration there. Now, you can say anything you want about what it says, but I think
It's the law.
we both know that it's the truth. Like, sure, we can do anything we want based on that.
Correct.
But we also know where that money came from. So I also don't like doing this with a gun to our head. I don't like the last minute nature of it. I don't want to support this. At the very least, we need to include in this letter that the funds need to be applied towards the 550 King Street Common portion of the common sewer expansion project, because that's what the original intent of that earmark was, in my opinion.
If I can, I'd like to explain why this became suddenly urgent. So the SRF program requires an explanation of all of the appropriations, to all the funding that covers the project. Like I mentioned, the local appropriations have to have been made by June 30th, 2022. This is not a local appropriation per se, it's a state appropriation. The Commonwealth already appropriated it in the law. So our assumption up until last Thursday was that the law itself would serve as a documentation of the appropriation for that $8 million. And on Thursday last week, they told us that may be the case. They've never dealt with this specific situation before, and so they needed something from a town official indicating that the $8 million would be available for their sewer project. And so that's why it became suddenly urgent that we needed the letter.
But, I mean, another way of saying that is, until last Thursday, you assumed that $8 million was yours to spend, when in fact it wasn't. It was the town of Littleton's to spend. Like, you were just assuming that $8 million was going to go towards the sewer, because that's how you had the numbers worked out, when in fact, it wasn't dedicated to the sewer. Is that accurate?
Previous votes by this board dedicated the first $9 million.
Of the Mass Works grant, not of the earmark.
Okay, well, the first, I don't believe it said Mass
It
Works.
did. I watched the
Okay.
meeting yesterday, and it says, we specifically made a distinction, between the Mass Works grant and the earmark. So we voted on the Mass Works grant, we did not vote on the earmark.
That's fine.
We never committed this $8 million to the sewer.
I don't think we even knew about the earmark back then.
We had a conversation. I watched the meeting. We talked about the earmark and the Mass Works grant. You can go back and look at that, but the meeting that Ms. Napoli represented was a discussion and vote about those two funding sources and how we were going to work on it. We talked about $19 million from the Mass Works grant, and the first $9 million, or $8 million, I don't remember, was going to come to the sewer. We did not ever discuss that the earmark was going to go to the sewer. Now, look, I'm a big proponent of the sewer. I think it's going to be great for the town. I understand that it's going to save a ton of money. It's super frustrating to have to do it this way, and I don't like it. So I guess the board is going to vote the way the board's going to vote, but I'm done. That's my piece. I'm not going to say any more.
My only other point is that, and I appreciate every point of view that's been expressed. The fact of the matter is, if we do not get the SRF funds, whether it be the town benefit or the Poli development benefit, there's going to be $34 million in additional expense that is avoidable if we submit this letter.
Because we didn't do the proper math to understand that we were fully funded until last Thursday.
So that's not entirely true though, right? Because the SRF loan also requires the Buy American, whereas we didn't do the SRF loan, we don't have to do that, and I believe that would save some cost. Is that not
Some,
correct?
it might save a million or two, which is
So-
not 34 million, but.
No,
Was that not some of that waived, though? The Buy American?
It was the steel was
yeah.
waived, but
No,
not the
the
rest
new
of it.
Buy American requirements were waived, but the
Because the
American
project
Iron and
was in the
Steel
works before
requirements
the-
are still
Before
there.
the
Right,
statement was made?
yeah. But the American Iron and Steel requirements are still there, because those have been in existence for 10 years now, and those are significant. There's a lot of iron and steel in the project.
So that was already baked in.
That was, yes.
Yeah, I'm at a point of, like I had said, at the end of the day, the relationship between our two boards has to grow and has to get better. We need to definitely be,
I think it's been fine. We've
Well-
been communicating.
well, I mean, I'm listening here. I mean, I've only been on this board 9 months, so I
Yeah.
can't speak
I mean,
historically.
I don't see any, I think we've been communicating fine. We come up, you have your working committee, you have your representation on the working committee. Any of our
Yeah.
communications come up through Tony and.
Yeah, between our two boards certainly, but also, this is a historic development that's coming into Littleton, the largest in Littleton's history.
I agree.
And it's, I saw, I know Mark, you had reached out, we received some information on what it means to Littleton. We wanted to see the numbers and how that affects Littleton, so those things probably weren't shared with you enough. I think our board can do a better job as well, meeting with that, and that's why I think that's the financial piece that, since, I don't know, last May when we first started talking about this, and going after more monies, I think we probably should have, and I know we had 2 members on our board attending meetings. There's still a lot of frustration, for whatever reason, between the 2 boards, between Lapoli companies and your Light and Water, to some degree, on how this marriage is going to work, because, let's be honest, we're both dependent on each other for this project. It doesn't happen for either without both.
It's a
correct?
partnership, it's a partnership.
I mean,
Okay, so-
You know, based on that last meeting, you guys were there, you know, we had communication, I kept asking you guys to Sal and his team, any other questions, any frustrations, anything at all. They didn't say any frustrations to me or during that meeting. Now, if they had side conversations with these guys, I don't know about it. But that meeting I thought was very pleasant, we all got along, they understand the process. I thought it was a very good, productive meeting, and I think that's how they've been.
So, can I just ask, so what is the issue? I mean, do we as a board, do we agree to commit money towards the sewer project?
I feel as though we don't have a choice.
No.
We don't have a choice about committing this money to the sewer project, given the SRF loan and the amount of money it'll save.
It's $10 million to the residents, $24 million to the developer. That's the interest savings alone. If we go with the SRF versus, and you're estimating at 5.5%, and
Might be higher.
God willing, it's 5.5%. Again, that's a good rate.
And the process has to start over again.
Correct.
So
I
that's
guess
another
my-
year delay or more.
Right, so I guess my point is, when we were applying for, I guess what was the MassWorks grant, the one for $19 million, we as a board voted at that meeting that we would, not less than $8 million of that money, had we got it, would go towards the
Nine.
sewer.
Correct, that's
Right?
correct, yeah.
So we as a board agreed from that funding source, that's the money that we were going to commit towards the sewer project,
Correct.
correct? So now, this is a different funding source that we previously apparently did not discuss as a board, committing this amount to the sewer project. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct as well, yeah.
Okay, so what's the difference between the $8 million we were going to dedicate between the MassWorks grant and this $8 million? Because I guess that's where I'm getting confused. We still agreed.
The intention of the grant, if we had applied for a loan for the sewer project for MassWorks, that's for the sewer project. This was not earmarked for the sewer project. It was earmarked for the Littleton King Street Common development.
Okay, so what we're actually addressing here is what kind of an allocation between the sewer project and Lapoli companies.
Essentially, that's correct, I
Okay, but
believe.
this is money that's being allocated to the town of Littleton, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're deciding on between allocating money towards a project specific to the town of Littleton or helping to offset costs of a developer.
Which
Is what I'm
well,
hearing.
which also benefits the developer. Even if we apply it to the town, it also saves the developer interest, tons of interest.
If we apply this $8 million to the sewer
yes.
project, it's going to help.
As a funding source for,
Yes.
to
So
check
why
the
are
box
we,
with
what's the debate?
DEP.
I don't understand what the issue is.
So my concern is that 4 weeks ago, we sat with the developer and said this money wasn't being allocated, and now we are.
Okay,
So,
back up 1 second. I wasn't at that meeting. There
No.
wasn't a quorum of the
Light-
select board at
no.
that meeting.
There
Light
wasn't.
and Water said, that, and we all agreed at that meeting, that we would have a discussion after the bids came in, which is 2 weeks. March 15th was what the date was set.
Okay,
So if the SRF loan, we can't get them to wait 2 more weeks, then I have a hard time believing it's so urgent, all of a sudden, in the past week, that we can't wait 2 more weeks to decide this.
well, I think it was explained to us why we need to decide on it now, but,
But that was because they already made an assumption that they had it, right? So they already decided. So,
Yeah, I think our assumption was based on what Ms. Napoli
right,
described.
we, as a
Yeah.
board, had
Whether it was
had conveyed
MassWorks or-
publicly that we're gonna commit $8 million to the
no,
sewer
no, we
project.
conveyed publicly that we were conveying a MassWorks grant to the sewer project.
Okay, but what does it matter where the money comes from? I guess that's what I'm lost at. Either we're committing money or we're not committing money. I'm kind of lost about what does it matter what the funding source is? I mean, it's before us now. They're asking us to use money that we know is before us towards the sewer project. I'm kind of lost. at what we're even arguing about, or debating, rather.
I mean, I have a problem with the timing, I do, and I mentioned that when I first spoke. Looking back through the meeting minutes of your meetings with the working group, it mentioned the March 15th date, so that was my expectation, was March 15th, we're going to find out more information, lock in some numbers. Now, after talking to you today, that's March 22nd is really those numbers. However, the SRF has come after you for a number that's basically saying, what are the project costs and how are you paying for it? We need to know right now. Not guesses, but we need to see the funding source. And that's why this is in front of us, and that's why I don't like it either. I don't, but I'm going to say that by saying up to 8 million, we still get a play in the game here. Do I think these costs are going to come down? No, but they have. I mean, some have shifted over the last several months. Things are coming back a little bit, but I
This is up
think.
4 million from what we were told.
But in fairness, SRF makes you put in a ton of contingencies above and beyond.
That's the
contingencies
problem.
that we already had built in. So, in theory, I don't want to make any promises here, but in theory, it's going to come in
All right,
at a
so
better number than.
Can I also say
what's
that
being
nowhere in any of the
justified.
email chain in the packet did it say that this was an urgent, that a date from the SRF loans? There was no date anywhere in there. There was just a request from Corey to get these papers signed. There was no indication of the urgency anywhere in the chain.
Well, there was some conversations last week between Mr. Lawler and yourself, right, saying we need this done. So it went to
There
the
Yeah, there
went to the
was actually,
treasurers,
yeah, Nick sent an email of high importance.
Right.
Yeah.
There were no, I don't remember seeing any dates in any of in the packet, there's nothing that has a date. That says.
I think they wanted it immediately. I mean, they wanted the treasurer's office to send something over last week.
Look, if we could go back in time, I would have stood there when I was on FinCom and said, guys, prices are going to go up. I didn't think they'd go up this much. I would have said, don't drop back from 29 to 25, ask for the full amount. We're only going to get hit with more inflation, but how could we ever predict that?
We're in
right?
the same boat, we would have done the
So-
same, you know?
I am very cognizant of the fact why we have that $8 million on a developer, the largest that Littleton's ever seen, went to the state, earmarked, got that money for us for the King Street project, the development of Kings, that's how it was marked in the bill, and is, for me, to see that and then being told he's not getting any of it for sidewalks, expansion to a 3-lane, all these, he's not getting any of it for his infrastructure, was hard for me to swallow until I got into looking at, all I could do at that point was look at the numbers. And it came down to the developer, and he, I'm sure he's watching, he's going to love this, but I think we still have a lot of work to do with him on ways to make this work. But the bottom line is, he's saving more money here, potentially in interest, than he ever would with that $8 million. And I believe there was a letter last year, excuse me for forgetting it, that I believe he offered $6 million to the project
October.
if Littleton didn't receive money, correct?
That's correct.
So that goes away now. Now, the $6 million that he's committed to the town to help with this project, now that no longer is needed because we're actually, we're using the $8 million for the sewer. So I think all of these things put together made my decision not easy. This is just me, and I know we're all divided on this board on this. None of us wish we had to do it this way. We wish we had more time to see how we could break this money up better, because there's a lot going to go on at the Common on that King Street project. It's very specific, but I think this, to me, right now, is the best use of the money, and
Okay,
that's where I'm at.
So I suggest we vote, and I would also suggest we change it to dedicate up to 8 million. And if the rest of the board is amenable to that, then I think we should make a motion and move forward. I'm not sure
Do you
debate's
want
going
to
to do
use the
anything else.
language specifically in that email from town council?
Well, I don't believe they've reviewed town council.
No, I think up to is, I mean, this is an informal, like letter
Okay.
that we're sending.
Okay.
Just to affirm to the SRF people that we're committing this money. So I think up to 8 million is fine,
Okay.
unless there's any other discussion. Okay.
Move that the select board vote to dedicate up to $8 million from the earmark from Chapter 268 of the Acts of 2022 Economic Development Bill for the Littleton, what's it called, Common King Street Development. So, yeah.
For the-
It's
The Littleton
Sewer project expansion.
For the Littleton Sewer Project expansion, is that?
Correct.
I would ask it
Recommend,
up
Cory?
to is for the record, because it's not on that document.
Right, okay, yeah.
Okay,
And, okay, you want to do this one?
so I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Cindy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, so it's 4-0. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need to do a motion on the letter?
A motion on the letter as in,
That you're going to send? Do we need to-
I think you just did.
Part of that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
The second part of that motion, I know that we originally took a vote of an intent, but we need to finalize the vote for ARPA
Do
purposes.
you want me to amend the motion to say, and authorize the town administrator to
No, it's fine. If
Submit
you're
the letter,
saying
okay.
that
Yeah,
that's
it's fine.
sufficient,
Okay.
sure.
move that the, go ahead.
Could I, on the second part, what are we actually voting for here now? Because I think we said we were doing the 2 million instead of to pay for our betterment. So what exactly are,
Just to take the formal vote, which ARPA requires the select board to take a vote on
So-
where those funds go. But we've had the conversation with Corey. He knows that the intent is for the betterment purposes, for the town's betterment. We're just kind of prepaying. Does that make sense?
but it will be applied to the betterment.
That's what we all believe so, right?
Just so there's no confusion in a year or two when we have this discussion again.
Yeah, no, I think, I wasn't here at the meeting that Nick was at, I don't know if it was a month or two ago, to talk about that particular letter. It was a very similar kind of conversation. It's a similar concept where the $2 million needs to be available to the entire sewer project. We understand that it's the board's desire and intent to put that towards the town's betterment fee.
That's good. Thank you.
wait, it's our desire that it's being applied to the betterment fee, but it's the understanding of the light and water commissioners that it is being applied to the betterment fee.
It depends on the project cost, right? If we can't award a contract because we don't have sufficient funds and we need the 2 million in order to award a contract, then that changes things.
So what you're saying is we could be on the hook, pay the 2 million for the betterment fee, and then 2 million for the ARPA, and then still pay a betterment fee.
In theory, it's possible.
So that's not what we agreed to
Yeah.
before.
That's a problem.
So can we hash this out offline and vote on this, or do we have to vote on this tonight?
This is
You don't
part
have
of,
to
this is
vote on
part of
this
the.
tonight.
What?
So you already provided that letter.
Right, you
That
already
vote's been
provided the
taken,
letter.
it's
This was
done.
kind of finalizing.
So
don't-
let's nail this down before we vote. So there's no more confusion.
This isn't part of the SRF.
Correct.
No, I don't know why that's on there. These are two separate things.
It's on there because we have to take, the board has to take that final vote to actually dedicate the ARPA money.
But you did that at the last.
We did an intent. It was just to satisfy the SRF, the letter. But
So
the
if you-
ARPA, the federal government wants that vote that says it's going to that place.
Okay.
And we
So-
didn't think the betterments for the town were going to equal $2 million.
No, they won't. No.
So I think there's, when we talked about it on that intent discussion, it's going to be 1 point whatever, so there would be money left over for other parts of the
Right,
project.
let's just make sure it goes to the betterment first.
No, so we agreed to give the 2 million for the ARPA funds in exchange for,
Being
as
applied
our,
to-
as applied to our betterment. So the town will not owe a betterment above the $2 million.
Okay, unless the betterments are over $2 million, which they're not right now, but I can't speak to.
We were like 1.2 or something in that range.
Yeah, so it's,
It has to
I
go
don't ever
considerably.
think we'll get there, but I'm just, yeah, yes, I think you're right.
So if we get the light and water commissioners, what department, whatever, to agree that the $2 million is our betterment fee, covers our betterment fee, then I'm fine with this. But if it's not in agreement, then I'm not okay with it, because then we're on the hook potentially for another 1.2.
We've been saying that all along.
I see what you're saying.
We've been saying
Yeah.
that all along. There's no change. We've been saying that all along, so.
Can we craft this language right now, just a little tweak that'll work, so we can get it done?
So
Well, they actually
Say
don't
that-
need this. I think Corey has everything that he needs for the SRF
I need-
loan application.
Right.
We can, you
Sure.
can always
Okay.
table this for another meeting, and we can take that formal vote. At some point, we have to take the formal vote.
But let's make sure that the wording is proper and correct. So we all get what we want.
Yeah,
Like,
I
so
would
that everybody
imagine-
understands,
I would
I
imagine
guess.
there's gonna be an agreement with the town, right? One of those,
What, like an
contract.
MOU or
Yeah,
something?
no, not the contract,
Oh,
just like,
Reserve?
yeah.
Well, no, the reserve is only for projects that have a plan and ready moving forward. You're an existing company, existing customer.
Customer, yeah.
And, you know, anybody, any of the businesses in town, well, they've already built. You know, the only
I didn't know
other,
if there was a betterment contract that would
No,
eventually had to be
no.
signed. Okay.
the only other project is a bank project that would fall into this reserve process.
Northern Bank and Trust.
Correct. Because they're a project that's not done yet, they have planning board approvals in the end, so.
Yeah, if you're able to wait to take that vote that you need to take on the ARPA money until after March 22nd,
Yeah, we
then I
can do
think
that.
Let's
Yeah,
do that.
Corey, we
That would be
can-
perfect.
We can do it in April,
Yeah.
or something. Yeah, we have time. It was kind of just,
On this, absolutely,
yeah.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
All right. Police Department, mutual aid.
Agencies,
Who's here for that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's Anthony.
right? Well, the chief
You're on the-
got delayed, right?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
the-
right. Oh, he's still in.
Flights.
Yes.
He got snowed in.
So, all this is a memorandum of mutual aid agreement between Littleton and the surrounding communities to provide mutual aid. This was an agreement that was written by the Chiefs of Police Association for each of the communities, and they're asking for each community to just have adopted.
Is this an extension of an existing one or a new one?
That's what I was gonna ask.
I
I think
believe we had something
entered
before.
into this before.
Yeah, right. I
Yeah,
recall
we
doing it before.
routinely entered into this
Yeah,
agreement,
right.
yeah.
Is there any discussion on this from the board?
My only question was, it says we're a 48, Section 8G community. I assume we did that a long time ago. I just don't know where that agreement is, or that information is.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that, but this is just, again, it's just for police details. It's to allow them to go into other communities and for us to bill going into those.
Yeah, and I
communities.
think historically, we've been able to do that, we've had an agreement, but this one specifically says, allows us to bill directly with the companies rather than bill each town.
Each
So
town,
We
right.
can actually bill the company that's having our detail.
No, I'm just saying, as part of the whereas, it says whereas Chapter 40, Section 8G of MGL has been duly accepted by each of the parties. I assume there's somewhere that we've already
Oh,
have
I
a
see.
contract that we've accepted that.
Right.
And I don't know where that agreement is.
Yeah, the
You can
histor-
search on the town website.
Historically, we've always had an
Good luck.
You
MOU.
can find it like that, Mark.
Yeah, I'm sure that's been vetted.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready for a motion?
Move the select board vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8G, to authorize the town administrator and chief of police to execute a mutual aid agreement between the Littleton Police Department and all other endorsing police agencies within Middlesex County, Ayer, Dunstable, Groton, Littleton, Pepperell, and Townsend Police.
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Cindy. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. The motion carries 5-0.
Next is just a gift that the
Gift
police department
acceptance.
received, about $1,500 gift from the Lowell 5. I believe this is the part 2. I think the
Yep.
fire had the original 1,500,
Yep.
so this is just the police.
Thanks, Lowell 5. Ready for a motion?
Chuck was just looking, oh, sorry.
It's not in the packet.
Oh, I bet. I know.
There we go.
Okay, move the select board vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A, and per its policy on solicitation acceptance of monetary and non-monetary gifts for public purpose, to accept a donation from Lowell 5 to the town of Littleton in the amount of $1,500 for community policing funds.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Mark. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, public input, ladies and gentlemen. Please step up to the mic.
Good evening. Jenna Brownson. I live on Harvard Road. I'm going to read something to you because I think it'll be easier that way. This is for all 5 of you. When will Community Care Collective and Littleton Apothecary be asked to come before the Select Board to update the residents of Littleton on the progress each has made toward capitalizing on the contractual relationship each has through the HCA that it holds with the town. With each passing day, Littleton misses out on the benefit of collecting 3% marijuana excise tax and less, and until both entities are up and running, we are missing out on that money. I own a house with my husband and heir. Our taxes went down, and they went down because Gage sold $31 million worth of cannabis in 2021. I'm unaware of other places on the planet where property taxes go down, but it has happened next door. Given how focused the town has been in 2018 and 2019 on the prospects of recreational marijuana shops in town, it seems to me the time is right for a comprehensive update from the retail marijuana HCA holders, so the townspeople know the progress these retail businesses are making or not making toward providing Littleton taxpayers the benefit of the 3% marijuana excise tax. As this issue indirectly impacts each Littleton taxpayer, I, as one of them, thank you for your conscientious attention to ending this dearth of communication. This, I did paraphrase, this was sent to the 5 of you on the 10th of August. That's 6 months and 18 days ago. My understanding is that Community Care Collective is up and running, and they sold $1 million worth of cannabis in a quarter, which means the town got $30,000. So that means 2 quarters have passed. That's potentially the loss of $60,000 for the one shop that remains completely silent on whether or not it's going to get going. So this came up 2 weeks ago, and this group said we should definitely know something in 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks, so I'm curious, what's happened?
I'd love to address that, thank you. So what's happened is we had a town meeting 2 weeks ago. That took a lot of time. And then last week, it was a 4-day work week, and I actually had a death, 2 deaths in the family, which I really shouldn't have even been working, but I came in, and I only took Friday. So we haven't gotten a chance to do it. There's 2 people, and we're doing our best. So certainly, we're going to put it on for the next board meeting, but we can only do what we can do with the people that we have. And should you mention that you have a financial interest in what you're talking about?
Absolutely, I can
Okay,
mention
I
that I
just
have a
didn't know if
financial
you
interest,
missed
but
that.
as does every single taxpayer in this town,
Right.
as does the
Little
state,
different, though.
who's missing out on 11.75% marijuana excise tax for the state. So yes, I do have a financial interest because I, at one time, was a co-owner of this business. That ended up in litigation, which has resulted in my standing here.
Mr. Chair, we're happy to put this on for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Mr. Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, George Sanders, 672 Great Road. I want to let you know I made a mistake, and I went to the town chief assessor and got a quick lesson about taxes here in the town of Littleton here, and to find out about the CPA increase and how the taxes was applied in the 2.5, which I said the 2.5, and I said if they want to add 2% more for the CPA, then we paying 5.5. Well, that's the mistake that I made by the 5.5. It's not 5.5, okay? So I was right about the 2.5 because the levy goes up by 2.5, and there's a separation between the CPA money that comes in, and it doesn't get bundled in with the levy, because if it did, that'd be a double whammy to us. So I just want to get an opportunity when we talk about the CPA, because I have some concerns about the CPA when you go to discuss that matter. And I support the list there of LLB with the music center up there. I sent you, you've seen the list of the 10 minimized items that I think that we need to do in cosmetics with that building up there. So we can get this thing back in to June town meeting so we can get the money, if it's there, either in the next year budget. Because we would like to get those people in there, get that building squared away and up and running. We need it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If there's no more public input, we'll go to members' updates. Mr. Wilson, will you start us off?
For whatever reason, I'm not prepared, so
Okay.
I have
So you can't start us off, or you have no update?
You're focusing on the SRF loan.
All right, well, good job.
My
Chuck?
brain's fried.
Okay, that's fine. Chuck, do you have anything?
I just want to thank everybody that came out to town meeting. It was, there's always a work in progress. We can always learn from it, and I appreciate the town clerk, the town administrator, the assistant town administrator, the moderator, and everybody, all the volunteers, and everyone that comes out to help make that happen. And we always look for opportunities for improvement, and that is, we're doing that for this as well. But for those that did come out, and it is the purest form of government, and appreciate all those that came out. And personally, I'm happy that the Indian Hill property on King Street did pass, so thank you for those that did vote in favor of it.
Mr. Ronnebacher?
So I went to the Littleton Robotics Open House on Saturday. I think Chuck was there earlier in the day, I heard. And the kids are doing an amazing job, and good luck to them in their upcoming competitions, which I think there's one in Worcester at WPI in the beginning of April. And then I don't remember all the ones past that.
Nationals are in Houston, so it's,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
they'll be looking
And
to
I
cover
wanted to
for
thank
us.
everyone that sponsors them. It's not a cheap venture, so. And the other thing I had, I don't know who this necessarily goes to, but we got that mail about someone participating in the broadband initiative. I don't know if we're going to select a member or what the plan was for how we were, if we were going to participate in.
So the broadband grant was, Corey's, so that was LELWD, yeah.
LELWD.
So we can certainly pass that on, and I think I may have passed, I'll have to check,
Okay.
but to them and see if they wanted to have somebody participate.
Is that it?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Ms.
They're
Navin?
doing great things over there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to follow up and thank everybody that came out for town meeting last week. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago? Can't
It's all a
remember.
blur.
I can't, no, but I think a lot of things actually came to light through that process. I do want to thank the town clerk and everybody that volunteered to count the ballots. I thought it was well organized and it was a great process personally. I know that there was just a lot of confusion about one of the warrant articles, and I think what really came to light through that process and then just seeing some chatter on social media is just being able to provide residents with a little bit more detail about the warrant articles, specifically the consequences of the articles. I think it was a revelation for people to realize that, if we were to do anything with the Shattuck Street building, that it would be a vote before town meeting. I think a lot of people didn't realize that. There was a lot of confusion over the planning board article, just as far as trying to figure out what's already been voted on, what zoning bylaws have been passed. So just maybe finding a way to provide more detail through the town meeting process. And, we are coming up on another town meeting, so maybe we can talk a little bit more about that as those warrant articles come through. But I just wanted to acknowledge that concern amongst the residents, and I think it's definitely something that the board needs to maybe talk about in the future.
Well, I know that Anthony and Mr. Sanders both do LCTV shows where they discuss the warrant articles, and I think it's that exact
It's the
kind
extra
of
component
information.
of it, yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
one thing to read and talk about the article, but I think what people are lacking is, how do we get here, and what's the consequence of this vote?
Yeah.
What is,
I mean, the consequences is maybe something that we have not.
right,
Yeah.
touched on, yeah,
Okay.
so, that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson, are you
All right,
ready?
I think I'm prepared.
You sure?
It's not much. Just the town meeting, which we're going to talk, you might have saw on the agenda about the possibility of electronic voting, which has come a long way. And I know, Diane, you're well aware of some of that. Probably wanted it years ago, but it was just too expensive. I think I'll save that discussion, but just to let the town know, those that did attend special town meeting, we do I don't know if everybody's aware, we do a pre-town meeting with the officials, the chair and the vice chair and the different clerk and the moderator, and we go over each article to see what we're thinking could happen. A lot of things you can never prepare for, as you can imagine, especially in a special, and when you get into some of the heated topics. But we also have a post meeting after that, and this is where we discussed a lot of the concerns of the public that did reach out to us. We are aware of it as well. Obviously, we're living it, so I think we have some ways we're going to discuss tonight to streamline that, but we hear you, and there's always ways to improve. So, and I know Diane's a big proponent of that as well. This is kind of an off the ball because I know what the weather's coming. Have we discussed weather tomorrow?
Yes, we have an alternate date for the joint meeting with FinCom.
That one, I'm just saying in general.
Oh, in general.
Yeah. So,
Sorry to
You don't care about
put you on the
town
spot.
employees.
So we actually just received an
Schools, I don't
email that the schools have been canceled
Oh,
for
they
tomorrow.
have.
So from Superintendent Clenchey just sent that. And, the storm is not hitting at the best time because it's going to be really it's going to spread all day. So we're kind of continuing to monitor the weather reports, and I'll be in touch early in the morning with Steve Yonley and Chief Bernard and Deputy Interim Chief Clancy and make some determinations on what's the best, not only for our employees, but also for those members of the DPW that have to clean that, right? Because, our priorities is always going to be keep the roads as passable as possible. So we'll weigh into that, and we'll make a call in the morning on what makes sense, depending on what the storm is. It could be a delayed opening, or it could be the town hall's closed, it's a remote work day or something. So we're monitoring it. We just don't have an answer right now.
And there's no way to make the call now. I mean, I know a lot of communities are.
I could, it's just, we're in New England, we could wake up tomorrow and it's raining, right? So.
No, I know it's your decision, but I just, looking out and
it's-
it doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good, but we'll get up early and take a look and call each other and have coffee.
All right. We're good.
Thank you. Nothing from me. So let's move on to the joint meeting with the CPC. Good evening. Would you like to call your meeting to order? Yes. Do you have a quorum?
I don't think we have a quorum.
Oh, okay, well then, you can't.
Hi, good evening. Carolyn Mueller from the Community Preservation Committee. Linda Stein and Saul Marini are also here and with us. All right. So we will be talking about the discussion of a possible increase for property tax surcharge at town meeting. So just a real quick history on this history of the CPA, because there are a lot of people in town that don't really know and understand CPA. In May of 2007, Littleton adopted the Community Preservation Act, which established a 1% real estate surcharge, which took effect for fiscal year 2008. There are 4 buckets that we call them for the CPA: open space, historic preservation, community housing, and for recreation. In 2013, we added commercial and industrial property and exempted the first $100,000. This was a new provision of the CPA law, and it was designed to help small businesses while helping the town of Littleton. Town meeting of 2014, we became the first town in the community to adopt the Blended Fund Preservation Act. And by doing so, the town's 1% CPA property surcharge can be augmented by municipal revenues to the equivalent of another 2%, which increases our base of CPA for state matching funds. And we'll discuss the blended funds in more detail. But first, I want to let everyone know what CPA has meant to Littleton. We've accomplished a lot through CPA, and there's so much more that we can do. Since 2009, we've purchased almost 150 acres of open space worth $4.6 million. We've used about $1.8 million from CPA revenue, which has kept the borrowing low and also saved us rates on interest payments. These are like the Yap and the Cobb properties. The Boxborough Road Williams project was funded exclusively by CPA. And we saw the benefits through pandemic of what the town means, this land means to town. And open space has always been a priority for Littleton. Additionally, we've had improved access from Oak Hill. We've done improvements at Cloverdale, and we're having the open space and recreation plan updated, which will help us at the state level for grants, which we've been awfully successful at. Next slide. Recreation, we contributed $460,000 to the 300 King Street improvements a number of years ago for work around the tennis courts and what are now basketball courts, playground and landscaping. We've put $120,000 into Long Lake improvements. The access mats for ADA, those were funded by CPA. We continue the boardwalks, which make all the trails accessible. And again, this is at a time when they've become very popular. Next slide. Historic resources, one of the first projects was the replacing the slate roof at the Houghton Memorial Building. We've been able to do conservation work at the old burying ground in West Lawn Cemetery. We purchased outright the house at 12 Robinson Road. Didn't really turn out the way we intended, except that we have a permanent preservation, historic preservation deed on that property to save it. The next slide. Community housing. When state funds were not available, we were able to make emergency repairs to the Pine Tree Park on Shattuck Street, which helped the residents stay in their apartments. The rental assistance program, which is through the Affordable Housing Trust Voucher Program. We can support residents who need short or long-term assistance with their rental needs. And during the pandemic, there was an emergency assistance program for residents who lost their jobs due to the COVID-19, and we were able to bridge the gap. And the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is funded by CPA. Next slide. But what can CPA mean to Littleton? I've mentioned a few projects that we've done. Some of those are ongoing, they repeat, but there are just a few others. Open space again, the walking trails, dog park, playing fields. We can protect other historic assets, which include landscapes and farmland. Littleton is changing now. These are the things that people now want to protect. And of course, elderly housing, we could actually create affordable housing for some of Littleton's residents. And the assistance for the elderly, disabled, and family households is there as well. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about the Blended Funds Community Preservation Act because it is confusing. As I mentioned, we are a 1% community. That's a 1% surcharge. But because we're a blended funds community, we can augment that by municipal revenues to equivalent of 2%, which increases that base for state matching fund. So if we hit that 3%, we're eligible for the next two. There are 3 rounds of funding. We're eligible for the next 2 rounds, and I'll explain that in a minute. 3% is the maximum allowed by CPA statute. Additional revenue funds can come from mitigation funds in lieu of payments from developers, hotel occupancy tax, sale of municipal properties, parking fines, which probably don't mean much to Littleton. Existing funds, like we had the cell tower, which have now been deemed illegal, but that was a great source of revenue. Private gifts, we're bringing in the $200,000 from the sewer, the 242 King Street project. And also from, you can also put free cash into blended. So I don't have a slide for this, but this is how it works. So round 1 of the funding, 80% of what the CPA state trust fund has is paid out in the first round. Every CPA community, there are now 194 of us, receive the same percentage match to the funds that we raise locally. So every town gets that first round. So for example, say we're a 1% community, we raise $1 million. Round 1, the match is 30%, we get $300,000. Every CPA community would get that 30% match. The remaining funds in the CPA trust fund are available for distribution in the next 2 rounds, but only communities that have adopted a maximum of 3% somehow, or get 3% either with a surcharge or through blended funds, are eligible for those next 2 rounds. So in the second and third round, they are weighted so that smaller, less affluent communities get a bigger piece of the pie. It's a decile ranking. They have them grouped in 10. And it's determined on the population and property valuation per capita. Communities with the lowest property values and smallest populations are placed in more favorable deciles. So number 1 provides the highest level of funding in the 2 rounds. We're a number 7. So we're down, but we're not all the way down. So we would get, when you see that the towns that have a higher decile, they don't accumulate as much as Littleton would. So if our long-range plan is to have more money available for more and larger projects, for instance, playing fields, open space, which are all high-ticket items, it makes sense to be more efficient with our money and get a substantial return on investment by leveraging that state match. If you can think of CPA as a bank where these funds accumulate, we can actually use that money straight out rather than having a capital item or having, wash out to borrow or raise outside the levy. The slide that we just had up is what we now have. So the blended funds, when we started the blended funds, as you can see, we the first 4 years, 2015, 16, 17, 18, we did a really good job at collecting those. This was Keith Bergman, our former town administrator. That was his baby. He was really good at finding the funds. During the 5th year, though, in 2019, you can see they kind of dried up. Then we have a few years, of course, those are also COVID years, that we received nothing. In the last 2 years, we've received something, but not enough to get us up to that full 3%. So the next slide. So the disadvantages are, of course, we have no consistent source of blended funds. We have no policy to have those blended funds coming in. You have to have someone who can stay on top of this, and we don't have a CPA dedicated person, like Salem has a CPA administrator, so they can keep on top of what's going on. You kind of have to have a macro approach to the town. So we cannot count on a continued flow of blended funds that are at our disposal. Any year that we don't collect that full allowable amount, or worse, that we don't get any extra funds, we lose that state match on that additional revenue. So is there a solution? So of course the solution that would give us the benefit without any doubt, so obviously increasing the property tax surcharge, the increase in the surcharge collected would triple our funds without the disadvantages that we just talked about. Next slide, Irene. Comparing us to other communities, like I said, there's 194 communities, and every year there are a couple that are coming into CPA. As you can see, we're at about a third. The orange piece of pie is ours, where the star is. 3% is the largest share, but not by much. For instance, a lot of the communities now are coming in at the lower rate, but Harvard just last week voted to raise from 1% to 3% their surcharge. Next slide. So what might this look like? So this is just kind of an example. The comparison of Littleton, a 1% community, with Brewster at 3%, was chosen strictly to look at the numbers. So if you think of Littleton as raising 3 times what we did, we'd come out to about 1.085, so it's similar to what Brewster did. So Brewster was able to, they were eligible for rounds 2 and 3, because they're a 3% community, and they raised $79,000 in those rounds. Now, Brewster is in a higher decile rank, so they would receive less than we would. They're a 10 versus us as a 7. So as you can see, I mean, the total CPA revenue of 471 versus 1.5, our reserves would increase a lot quicker if we were able to get that much money. And actually, this has been updated since 109,000. We actually received 139,000 for fiscal year 22. There was an adjustment done from CPA in December. Next slide. So these are the approximate balances at the end of fiscal year 23. As you can see, open space is 722, historic resources. Community housing is low because every year we take the money and sweep it out to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So it looks bad, but it's not. It's all been used. Recreation and undesignated. We have some projects going in, of course, at town meeting, but nothing huge right now. So right now, we're a little less than $2 million in the CPA reserve. So what about the taxpayer? So the CPA surcharge does not raise the tax rate for the community. It assesses a surcharge on the property bills after they've been calculated based on the current tax rate. It's a formula, but we did a rough calculation here to kind of see how different taxpayers would be affected. So the red mark is the average of Littleton. So if your home is assessed at $605,862, your 1% surcharge is $82 per year. So that's about $20 per quarter. Your real estate tax it's right after the black dividing line, would be $9,845. So if you combine that with the 1% surcharge, your tax rate's at about 1.64 instead of 1.625. At a 3%, if we go to the 3% surcharge, your tax rate's about 1.67. So it's only about a 0.03% increase on your tax bill. This is based only on CPA, not any other tax increases. So as I mentioned, we can think of CPA as a savings account. Open space is the best example because sometimes those funds, we need them now. A piece of land is for sale right now, we need them. So we could have $1 million or more sitting in open space that we might be able to just outright buy the land. Otherwise, you have to find it in the town budget. You might have to do an override, a new appropriation. Even the CPA people say it's, you get it from the taxpayers now or you have to get it later. So we need to decide whether the trade-off is worth it to collect the money up front, take advantage of those 3 rounds of the state funding, or try to scrape up funds, which may or may not happen, or just forego the additional revenue that we could get from the state. So there are exemptions for every taxpayer. We are currently maxed out. We have all the exemptions that CPA offers. We exempt the first $100,000 of your assessed value for both residential and commercial properties. We have an exemption for low-income residents and for homeowners 60 or over. The income requirements are fairly generous. You have to fill out a form. There's a form for Littleton. And these exemptions we would not change. Next slide. So the proposal is to increase the CPA revenue to 3% for next year. This would allow Littleton to benefit from the current high distribution of matching funds from the state. It was 30.3% last year. It's a little higher this year. It would allow Littleton to accumulate funds, which could be used for projects beyond the reach of the general budget process. And it will allow Littleton to continue to preserve and improve the quality of life in our community, which is the basic tenet of the Community Preservation Act. So that's the proposal, and we just have some, I don't know if either of my colleagues would like to speak, but I guess that's the starting point.
Thank you very much. I have a couple questions. Do you know of the 194 towns, how many reach the 3%? Yeah. Like roughly what percentage of them get into the second and third round?
It's, what is it?
Was that on the pie chart?
It was, yeah, it's about, I think there's 76 communities are 3% communities. And there are only, I think there are only 4 blended fund communities. The blended fund program did not take off.
Okay.
And we, and I think one other community are the only ones who've taken advantage of it.
If we vote to go to the 3%, is there any possibility of still using municipal funds to get up to the 3% and offset some of that increase of the property taxes?
No.
Or is it's all or nothing?
It's all or nothing, or some combination thereof. I mean, there are other,
So we could say 2% and then try to raise the additional 1 with funds, but we might not get there.
But we might not get there, right?
And with the 3%, you're guaranteed to get there.
Guaranteed to, yes.
And just from your figures, it strikes me that the 3%, the vast majority of the increase is due to the actual tax. The money that Brewster got from the second and third round was relatively small. It was 79,000 instead of 1.1 million. So a little bit more, but not a lot more.
Right.
Well, that's only partially true, because the 2% the extra 2% was also matched at 30%, right?
Right, but so was the
Yeah.
1.1 million.
No, well, the 1.1,
It was all matched at,
right, so when we're only doing the 1%, we only get 1% match, but if we do 3%, we get all 3% of the match, right? So,
I think there's ended up getting like a 37%
yeah,
interest
instead of
rate.
30.
Yeah, instead of 30.
Okay.
Yeah, right there, 37.5.
I had a question on the exemptions. Is there a potential of adding like an agriculture, Chapter 61 land being exempt? It seems like we're trying to protect that land, and it seems like we're doubly taxing them, right? We're taxing them to protect them, but yet,
No, I don't think CPA doesn't have an exemption for that, and that's the statute, so.
I mean, I think to a degree,
Can you come up to this, can you come up to the mic so the people at home, the cheap seats can see you? And introduce yourself?
Solomon Marini, and I think to a degree, because their tax rates are lowered under that program, it's sort of somewhat offset. I agree with you, it is a little conflicting, but.
It's a state law. The exemptions are by state law. You'd have to change the state law.
Okay, so we can't do a town
Yeah.
meeting
Yeah,
to change
yeah,
it.
town,
Unfortunately,
yeah.
no.
which would apply to seniors that, I mean, have been in their home for X number of years, or, you know, like the SelBrd test. Or,
Through the chair, so the state law also covers the 100% exemption on commercial and industrial, that's a state law?
100
Yes.
grand.
Yeah,
100,000,
What
not
did I say?
100%.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that would be great. wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, 100,000, yes.
Decimate our income.
Who determines what you spend the money on? Is it to be spent on open space?
If you, hang on, if you'd like to talk, can you hang on? Because,
Yeah.
Anthony, you were going to speak?
I just wanted to mention that Carolyn had a slide earlier where we were contributing back in 2015, 16, 17. Those were years where we were experiencing some great new growth. Why? Because of the point. And then that's kind of fallen off, and during the pandemic and even now, you know, with IBM, we actually lost, you know, we talked about that a couple of years ago, as we lost $900,000 in tax revenue, which was a hit to the homeowner for about $140 a year. So, and right now, as you saw during our budget process this year, there's just no additional money. It would be great if we had, you know, could put more into the blended funds. It's just, we're not experiencing that great growth that Keith had back then with the point we're coming on.
Do you want to?
Well, can I speak?
Yeah, oh,
I'm
sorry. Go
sorry.
ahead. Yeah, no,
That's all right.
please.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Carolyn, can you just go back to round 2 and round 3?
Yeah.
I just didn't follow
Yeah, I know.
that
it's-
information.
It's a little bit of rocket science. So the first round, what they do is they take 80% of what the CPA has, from, legislature decides what goes into the trust fund. Thank
Okay.
you. So 80% of that goes through the first round. Every community gets a percentage of that.
Okay,
Only communities that are 3% communities are eligible for, or have raised it through blended funds, are eligible for rounds 2 and 3.
okay.
So round 2 is the first one, and typically they fund that one. Trying to think of how the state controls it, the state commissioner controls what gets meted out to everyone.
Okay.
And the third round is often, sometimes they don't even do a third round. It depends on how much they've collected.
Okay.
In the last few years, they're collecting more. They're actually putting more in. My personal opinion is after Boston signed up, they have the leverage to get, you know, more money in. So all of a sudden now, there's a lot more money that's available.
Okay. All right, perfect, thank you.
so just real quick, while we're on this slide, if we were a 3% community, we would be getting basically the same money or a little more than Brewster did, since we're at a lower docile, so.
Right. Yeah, that's why I
So
use them, just,
we'd be over 1.5 per year we would
right,
collect.
yes, last
Or
year we would
last
have.
year.
Got it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it
that's
would-
why I used Brewster, it was just the numbers worked out
Yeah.
nice.
I missed that the first time.
Do you have a comment?
Too old for this. I'm curious as who picks what you spend the money on? I mean,
Introduce
the
Peter
choose-
Scott.
The town, the board, CPC? Boom.
May I? So this Community Preservation Committee hears all the projects. Projects are brought to us, we vet them, make sure, you know, the i's are dotted, t's are crossed. We do have a little back and forth with some of them. After we've decided that they're eligible for CPA funding, we recommend them to town meeting, and town meeting votes on them. So you're voting, every year there are projects, so usually at the annual town meeting and oftentimes at special town meeting in the fall, it's up to town meeting to pass the projects.
That's what happened to the Robinson Road building, correct?
Yes.
You guys purchased that,
The town purchased it.
and then the town put money into it.
Can we not have back and forth from the audience, please? Mr. Sanders, would you like to say something?
Yeah.
George Sanders, 672 Great Wood. Mr. Moderator, I mean, not moderator, but...
Promotion, thank you, sir.
Second page.
Mr. Chairman, first and foremost, I think that a lot of people is not familiar with what taxpayers are picking up. The IBM, when you lost IBM up there, the shift, because the town is still entitled to collect the money. So the resident end up putting out more money so that the town can still collect the amount of money that they need to collect. So when you count that, I think Anthony said that whatever it was, $140 or $150 or whatever the case is, if you move it to the 3%, you're talking about increasing of $165. That's what the amount is based on the figure that they're using with the average homeowner of $605,000 and $862. And they adjusted the tax on that particular amount, which meaning instead of the 605, it went to 505. That's how you come up with the 8220 there. But the actual tax on that property of 605 is the $9,845. And the $82 get added on top of that, which puts you at the 9,927. And if you go to 3%, it puts the 985 and add that to it, it puts you at the 10,092. My thing is this, you have to be mindful of what the people's ability is to pay. First off, we have inflation upon us. And I think we got a recession right around the corner. People need to understand it's nice to ask for money, but everybody got a budget. And you can't expect the people to come up and just arbitrary just says, okay, the cap. First of all, the CPA cap, I look at it as a circumvent of Proposition 2.5. It's permanent until the voters appeal it or reverse it. There's a permanent tax that we are paying. So when you add it up with the 2.5 that gets on the levy, the CPA is addition. So we're paying more than 2.5. You put the 1% on there, and my figure says you're paying 3%, 3.5%. I think that, first of all, this ain't the right time to be coming and asking the people to increase the taxes here for the CPA. You need to prioritize what you got there. You talk about the 4 buckets. We need to prioritize what you can do and what you can't do. The state just recently came back and started giving you 30% on the money you put in there. But I think, first and foremost, if you're going to come and ask us for a raise, I think you ought to be reasonable. If you got 1%, it's better to have a little bit more, maybe ask us for another 0.5%. That means half of what you're getting. If you're getting 82, you add for 50%, half more, then you get another $41. It's better than nothing. We need to understand people have to live too. And if you want to get these things, if you're coming up and you're coming up with these figures and saying, oh, it's nice to ask for this money, and we can just do this, get the 3% here and here and there. Well, I can tell you right now, I'm gonna fight you, because I'm gonna get on LCTV, and I'm gonna tell the voters exactly what's going down and why they shouldn't do it. If you want to come back and ask something reasonable to do it, and if you do it on the floor to get before the town meeting, I'm going to get up there and modify it. And I'm going to ask for, if you want a 0.5%, fine, take it or take nothing. We are tired of things coming up at the last minute saying, oh, take the money here, we need to spend it here, we need to spend it there. How much land does the town have that they have, that they say they bought $4 million worth of land? But how much land does the town have that is off the roads? You got millions of dollars of value of property that is off the roads. They just got the $4 million. It's not like the town don't have open space. It's not like the town doesn't have land. Some of you can't use, some of you can. But the fact is, it's open land. And I just don't understand how you can come up and want to ask the taxpayers to spend more money because you have a preference of this, and you're fortunate that we voted it in 2007. You only had, what was it, 1,100? You had 1,151 people voted yes. There was 620 that voted no, and there was 80 blanks on the ballot when this was put in, and the CPA. And the CPC. I'm concerned that there are those that are not concerned about the people's ability to pay taxes, and more especially the seniors that are in this town. People are trying to live in their home and stay in their homes in this town, and you're asking for them to spend more money to go and buy open land, so forth and so on. I think you need to be mindful that people have a budget that they have to live with. And the town needs to be mindful that when you come and ask for something, there needs to be a justification and a rationale as to why you need to buy this.
Thank you, sir.
Can I wrap it up?
Can you conclude, please?
I can conclude it.
Thank you.
Thank you kindly.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple comments. One of the buckets in there is housing assistance, so I think that helps with one of the dynamic groups that Mr. Sanders was speaking to.
And
but-
Pine Tree Park is largely seniors.
It is.
And it's subsidized and.
I know we're not getting into a discussion on the mechanism for this as far as how much or how a percentage increased, or if we go right with the 3, if we discuss that later on, or, I think we're not voting on anything tonight, correct?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
What's interesting about the list, there's not any controversial items on it when you look at what the money is used for. Every one of those things, everyone in the town can relate to as being something beneficial to your life. And so, what I can't get around is there's no other mechanism in the world besides cheating the stock market that's going to get you 30 to 37% on your dollar. So be mindful of that. There's no such thing as free money, because if you're paying into it, an individual that doesn't want to pay into it, we got to pay into this, and doesn't use any of those resources, then you're probably right. You have a right to be upset, for certain. I think I heard a lot of talk in special town meeting about too much, how we're growing too fast. We know these projects that are coming. This is a mechanism, and I know buying up land, being, right of first refusal for the town to look at a piece of land and say, well, let's grab that, or we're going to have another complex potentially in there, or a housing development, which that to me is another way to help slow development in our community. That's really all I had to say on it. I do think we have other mechanisms to help alleviate this. We talked in the past, I don't think we did. I heard the previous select board talk in the past about potentially using some of the marijuana money to help with this. Do you remember those conversations?
Designated funds, yeah.
Yeah, for the designated funds. So I think there's some other ways that we can leverage this to help. But, at the end of the day, I know we're not voting on anything tonight, but this is a great, thank you for the presentation.
Right.
It was a good class on what you do and how much, and what it looks like. I think it was really well put together. And I look forward to more discussions on it with you. Okay, one more question. Do you know the makeup of your board? That was the other thing I was thinking off the top of my head. Who's actually on your board? What departments or what?
Yeah, it's a 9-member board.
Okay.
There are, got me on the spot, there are 3 of us that are select board appointees. There's someone from FinCom, Historical Commission, Conservation Commission, Park and Rec, Planning Board, and the Housing Authority.
Do you have anyone at large?
There are 3 at large.
3
Yeah,
citizens.
select board appointees.
So that's the appointees from the select.
Yes.
Thank you.
Napoli, do you have
Thank you.
I
comments?
do, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Carolyn, thank you for putting together this presentation
Sure.
on behalf of the CPC and bringing it forward. I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people don't understand the CPC whatsoever. So your presentation outlining what projects have been come forward and come to fruition thanks to the availability of these funds, I think, will be enlightening to a lot of people. I think what you're proposing to us is an option.
Right, it's a negotiation starting. It's a starting
Exactly.
point.
And so I appreciate you bringing it to our attention, that this is an option. It is something that we can pursue if we choose to. And I think it's important to outline that for us. I do appreciate Mr. Sanders' points about what we're facing, especially with the loss of revenue as a result of 550 King Street, which is just a temporary loss. And it'll take some time for that to come back around. But I think it's good, this is a great conversation to have. We need to have this dialogue. And this is something that should definitely be on our radar and something that we should continue to discuss in the future to see what we can do. Because one of the things, we talk about development and preserving open space, and we voted earlier today for a consultant to come in. We're going to redo the open space and recreation plan. Well, if you've ever read that report, it talks about the green belt in Littleton, and that would be from Route 2A in Acton, heading all the way to Groton. All those farms that are along that roadway, we're very fortunate they're still here and they're still viable and productive. But there might be a day when they're not here, or they don't.
That's right.
They're not going to be active anymore, and what are we going to do?
Right.
So we need to plan ahead and try to be prepared for that, and this is a great mechanism that may be to help prepare us for that. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Mr. Rohrabacher?
I agree with everything that's been said. I'd like to point out that, every year Park and Rec comes and asks for new playing fields to be developed, and we say we have no land to develop new playing fields or no budget. Here's a potential budget source, or for the Wilson Aquatic Center, as Chuck keeps pointing out. And, we need to figure out how better to support some of these activities in town going forward, and the CPC is the way to do it, kind of outside of the normal budget cycle. And I do agree with Mr. Sanders that we need to figure out how to do this in a way that we phase it in potentially and make it affordable for the residents going forward, so it's not a sudden hit. But and we could do that through several means. So the phasing in the 3% is one mechanism we could do that, but there's others at our disposal too.
One more question, Mr. Chair. Carolyn, do you know how many people applied for the exemptions?
I don't. I
I
don't.
would be curious.
Yeah, I would be curious. I'm not sure, I'm not even sure that, the amounts on the website are updated.
Okay.
So, but, they are fairly generous.
Right. Yeah, I just don't know how many people take
But I
advantage
don't
of
know.
that,
I
or even aware of it, so.
well, that's it.
Right.
We are sort of at fault too, because our, part of the webpage is not updated very well. In fact, I just talked to Nancy to get that updated better, and we are now televising our meeting, or not televising, but we're recording our meetings. We don't really have public people come to talk about. And when we get to town meeting floor, I don't know if we've ever had anything, it usually goes through the consent calendar. It's
right.
nothing is ever too, asked about. I don't know if people really understand what the program does.
Right.
Is the $100,000, first $100,000 automatic? Or do you have to apply for that?
No, that's automatic.
Okay,
Yep, that's an automatic exemption.
Mr. DeCoste?
Yeah, and that's what brings that, the
605 to 505?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right,
Yeah.
right. It's just a basis. Again, Carolyn, thank you very much, and thank you to all the members of the CBC. It is good to kind of get our brains around this, because this is something that, I know I got a couple phone calls on it, and I'm sure we all did. You mentioned Keith Bergman in your presentation, and, I mean, Keith's got a lot of time on his hands. Maybe we could pick his brain a little bit. Bring him back as a consultant, or, just someone, just maybe ask him what rocks was he turning over to try to find. Maybe he's doing it in Concord now. He's not doing it for us anymore. But and you also mentioned that Salem has somebody that is specific. I mean, we're not anywhere near that.
No, I just
but
don't
if we
think
did give it a little more attention, there might be some additional opportunities for us if we don't get to the 3%, which I don't know that there's an appetite for us to do that immediately.
Right.
But we need to focus on expanding the blended fund as much as possible, and make sure that we're maximizing that.
Right. And
Because
it's-
to Mr. Wilson's point, it's a great return.
Right. Thinking about it ahead of time rather than we could have or we should have.
Yes, exactly. So, and just the exemptions thing was something that kind of, especially when Mr. Sanders stood up, it was something I was looking at ahead of time. And Mr. Wilson and I we haven't met yet, but we are part of a senior tax review board, that this would kind of fall into that as well. And we could have a conversation with Kathy Miller, and we could have a conversation with Liz and say, look, we need to collaborate and make sure that we're touching all these folks and letting them know that this is available. Maybe $82 isn't a lot to a lot of people, but to people that are on a budget, it certainly is impactful. And if we go to 3%, and you were tripling, then we'll go to 247, it's going to have an impact. So I very much appreciate you bringing this to light. I think there is great opportunity for us to have a funding source that, we can identify, but I think we need to maximize the blended version, at least on the short-term basis, as much as we can, and, whatever resources we need to throw at that. Thanks again.
And through the chair, I think getting the finance committee involved in this, and we create policies for everything else, and I think that would be a starting point as well, if we were talking about outside sources for funding and make it part of our policy. That helps.
And, I would just say, I do think that the return on investment is great, but also sitting on the Affordable Housing Trust, like, the money from the CPC is invaluable anytime we want to do something. And we have done lots of projects, and we continue to rely on that as a funding source for everything from purchasing things, renovating, obviously the rental assistance programs. And I didn't realize that you had also helped with Pine Tree Park. I'm on the Housing Authority as well, and I know that's a place that really needs help. So I think this is all around just nothing but a pure goodness for Littleton. So thank you.
So what's the next step?
Hands up.
Next step, if you're interested, you can go back and talk, and if you want to craft an article for town meeting, it could be presented, something for the annual, and then most likely would have to go to the voters in September, because you has to go 35 days after town meeting votes, and I don't think there'd be an appetite to have a special election for that purpose, because it costs money, but certainly we could hold that election in September with the primary.
Excuse me, is it possible to get something in the broadcaster, just to say, hey, folks, not sure if you saw this presentation of the select board meeting, this is the benefit of CPC, the Community Preservation Act. We have the opportunity to go to 3%, because that's a population that I know I'm concerned about, I think we're all concerned about it, and Mr. Sanders brought it up as well. maybe that's something we can get an
Yeah,
article
you know,
or
Carol, if you're
whatever.
interested, we could do a LCTV show where I could talk to you and you could go through some of this.
Even this
and-
presentation is a great.
And, yeah,
It's a
you did a
great
great job with the
presentation.
presentation,
Yeah.
and maybe just going through that for those that, at home, we could work that out, so.
And we might settle on 2% for the next
Right.
couple of years,
Sure.
and then there's
Right.
some, that way you're getting some feedback beyond the five of us, because we hear stuff, and some people don't want to do anything, and other people are like, yeah, it's a great idea,
Right.
do the 3%.
Okay. All right.
Mr. McIver, do you want to just have a brief, so we're already way over, so if you can make this succinct, I'd
Sure.
appreciate it.
I was here for, something else, a very good presentation. It is complex when you go through the rounds of funding, and those that are at 3% get the best return. It's, those with capability get more. The first 5 years, the town did not pass this, and it's because the selectmen were afraid of raising taxes. First 5 years was, you actually got double your money, you got 100% match. And it's actually Rick Finley and myself that wrote the legislation to pass the CPA in town, and we did by ballot box, secret ballot box by election. And there was a 2-to-1 favor of passing it. It was actually fairly complex. It took a couple of steps. Also, we went for 1% because we figured that was sort of the grounding. And there were actually 3 exemptions. The automatic 100,000 reduction from the assessment. You had to apply for the low income. And I forget what the third one is, but it's all laid out by the state law. But people are glad to have it done. I can think of some lands we got, such as the Proudy land, which actually I wrote the town meeting warrant article on that. There could have been 30 houses there, but we bought by conservation restriction. The first conservation restriction town that we bought, New England Forestry Foundation provided a lot of that. There could have been 30 houses there. You think of the cost of schooling, of road work and stuff. It would cost us perpetually money for that. In 5 years was the crossover when we paid for that. For what we paid in the conservation restriction would cover the first 5 years of that if there are 30 houses there, and the rest really was free. Saving land does save you money. It is counterintuitive, but it's true. As far as the blending aspect, that was a big win. And you can just pass money through and get it matched. So that was a big thing. There are not many communities that have the blended aspect. So, that's really an important aspect. As far as, who's on the committee, it's all done by state law. It's, people at town meeting have to approve it. So the final say is the town people. So it's giving an opportunity for that. The active recreation part was added in. Keith Bergman did that, so that was a new part.
We know the history,
Yeah,
Don.
so can we, do you have anything to add? Because I think
Well, this
all of these things that you're saying, we just heard, so.
Well, not necessarily the recreation
Okay.
part, but that was the fourth concern that was put in as a favor, because to help out there. As far as open space, if you look at the Audubon project that looks at all state data called Losing Ground, we're the 6th fastest developing area in Massachusetts. It's because of 495, Route 2, and the commuter rail. If you look at all the towns where we have the least open space of any town percentage-wise. And you go some places like Westford, they have more elaborate zoning, so they protect more through the zoning. The only place we might compare with percentage-wise have protected open spaces air, but they have all Devons and Oxbow Wildlife Refuge, which was part of Devons. So that puts a little more in context. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of history and also some understanding of there is a lot of concern for it. I too am concerned about my taxes, fixed income, my taxes went up on the land, taxes went up the house, I've done nothing to any of that. So I'm concerned about that, but this is important. Things disappear. If we don't save it now, we won't have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you make it very brief, Mr. Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make it
very, very quick.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just got notified there's no school for tomorrow. The school department said that. The other thing that I would recommend to this board is that you hire someone that can do grants. There's a lot of money. There's in state grants and federal grants. And we should have somebody on board that can write these grants and get this money in here that will take care instead of reaching in the taxpayer's pocket.
We agree with you, sir. Thank you. Any other final comments, or shall we move on? All right. Thank you very much, all of you. Responses to the RFI for senior affordable housing in Shattuck Street.
So I put this on, Mr. Chair. I just want to know how the board wants to proceed with those RFIs. Would you like us to set up at some point for them to come in and give a presentation to the board to go over their, what they submitted? It's just something that's been out there that we haven't circled back on. So.
Yeah, I would. I was, I went back through these when the packet came out, and I had forgotten how comprehensive, especially the CBA one was. Yeah. That was very impressive. They have a very impressive track record, and so I think it's much more real than I originally had thought when we sent this RFI out. I wasn't expecting 3 responses, but they clearly have a wealth of experience doing exactly this. So.
Who's that?
CBA.
The first one, CBA.
Coalition
I mean,
for
all
Better.
3 of them have a track record, but CBA has a ton of developments plus a property management, like integrated and all
Right.
that.
So I guess my question to you, Mr. Ansaldi, is what are we trying to get out of the RFIs? My understanding was we were just looking for whoever came forward and responded to the RFI to provide us with guidance about information that we might need to gather or information that we might want to incorporate into an RFP. It's not like we're awarding anything with the RFI.
No,
right?
you're not awarding.
It's just like a fact-finding
But they could
But
come
to-
in and present to us like, well, here's how the process often works, here's where the stumbling blocks are, here's where we might get funding, right?
Yeah.
All
no,
that kind of thing.
I don't disagree with bringing them in.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with what we expect to get.
The objective.
Yeah, I think
What the
that's-
objective is. Yeah, they were great. I thought Metro West too had a lot of great information, so.
We want their help to define the process and how we might go about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I kind of agree with all of that. I'm just wondering why we're bringing them in if we're not going to act on anything in the foreseeable future.
That's true as well.
Right. I mean, these are all great, but realistically, would we be doing anything
one
next
thing at a
year,
time,
2
right? We've
years,
got
3
Indian
years?
Hill, right?
So
Yeah.
if we're not going to be doing anything for years, what are we hoping to gain?
Right, that's a really good point. And the other thing too, specifically in the response from Metro West, like they outlined things that we need to look into. Like I think we have a lot more homework to do personally as a board before even considering moving forward with any project. And I thought Metro West brought up a lot of good points. I guess we could have them come in and recap their submission to us.
Sometimes it takes years to get this thing off the ground, you never
Right.
know, like if maybe they'll come in and say, we love the fact that you came to us 5 years before you wanted to build it. It gives us plenty of time to get all the funding in place.
Right, yeah, it wasn't so, and it was not only funding, but it was just as far as like, I don't know, soil testing and sewer and zoning and things like that. Like, there was just a lot of other checkpoints, I think, in the Metro West response that I just found them interesting because I was like, oh, I didn't think about that.
I mean, what do you think their response will be? Like if we say,
I don't know.
we don't have
It's
any
for-
direct.
For every reason that you all just said is why we brought it back, right? For discussion
okay.
purposes and to figure out, what are we doing with this? Is it nothing right now? That's nothing right now. If it's something that you want to have them come in, we can do that. I just didn't want it to be sit
Yeah,
there
okay.
and forgotten about.
I guess it does feel like this is a nebulous distant future.
Right.
So maybe we
So
should
whatever the
hold off
pleasure of the
and-
board.
So my personal opinion is I think we should post these somewhere on the website as their own, so people can see what some of the visions are. And then in 6 months, maybe we revisit, say, do we want to reengage and do this again, because we're so far from any action right now.
Right.
I don't
Well,
think bringing them in is going to help.
Did you get a vision out of, I don't think that they're giving us a vision. I think that they outlined like projects they had done in the
Yeah,
past.
yeah.
Maybe in that respect, it would
Yeah,
provide.
I'm saying that, so that the residents can see what some of the potentials could potentially be based on what the other projects are, right?
Right.
So I mean, they have the information in our packet, but it's not outside of our packet where they would find it easily.
Right.
So I'm just saying, make the information from the RFIs easier to find, and then let's revisit this in 6 months and see where we are. Are we ready to move on any of these projects? And then either issue another RFI at that time or bring them in.
Right, so I guess my point is, do we want to, based on the information in these reports, do we want to identify additional work that we might need to do as a board? Like there was in that Metro West report,
that's
there
a
was
fair thing,
think things in there that they said that we need to maybe look further into or have prepared as part of the RFP process. So do we want to maybe work on that as a board and try to identify those things as we?
I don't know, it still seems premature maybe, like we don't even know what's happening with Shattuck Street, the building, in any way at this point.
I think
Right.
those would be good goals for next year.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And I think developing relationships with DHCD, and finding out who our point of contact is at DHCD under the new administration,
Yeah.
to develop that relationship.
Well, and
invite
two
them
of the
out.
respondents mentioned specifically that we need to engage with DHCD
Correct.
for any project of this nature, so.
Can you
Right.
guys explain the acronym for people like me that?
Department of Housing and
Community
Community
Housing
Development.
Development, sorry. So,
They operate all the housing authorities.
I'll never forget it.
Okay,
okay.
okay. Sewer Working Group meeting minutes is the next item?
That is something that I had asked Mr. Ansaldi to put on the agenda back in January, but I think having discussion with certain select board members individually, that's been resolved.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, Lyle Webster Chapterland. Mr. Rombacher, you introduce this?
So Lyle Webster's here to talk about this project a little bit. In discussions I've had with him, he's interested in permanent conservation restrictions on his property, so I'll let Lyle take over.
Something we could use the CPC funds for?
There it
Yes.
is. Boom.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Board. Lyle Webster, 33 Bulkley Road, and for purposes of this evening, also 25 Bulkley Road. I had to bring it with me since we aren't meeting in room 103. This is one of the two paintings in there. And while I'm busy condensing, my family also owned the red building, the oldest home in town. So my family will celebrate 400 years on these shores 16 years from now. Our ancestors arrived in North America in 1639 after giving the Pilgrims a generation to prove it was all going to work out. Mark Rombacher prepared me to be brief in making my comments, as you've been meeting for several hours already and have more ahead. I'll condense a few centuries. We have been living here since before Littleton, Acton, and Boxborough were ever conceived as towns. Our family is the second family to own the oldest home in town, the Bulkley Farm from 1700. After the Great War, where my grandpa Luther Blanchard Furbush served as cook at Camp Devens, he bought the Bulkley Farm from Bulkley descendants in 1919. My family has lived in this home consistently for 104 years, and so as a few people have pointed out, you might not be aware that this land exists. Thank you for jumping ahead, Ryan. I will get there. After my mother passed away on December 1st of 2020, most people would fully expect the family to sell to developers. This slide, my sister and I acting on our fiduciary responsibility as co-executors, did gather bids from developers. We could cluster zone a cul-de-sac in the middle with a plus or minus 10-lot subdivision like neighboring Wilson Way, Croft Circle, or Wellington Drive. But I believe there is a higher purpose to this land, and I'm not the only one. Instead, my wife Gretchen and I chose to preserve the family legacy by buying out our siblings and purchasing the family home and land. We would like now to join forces with our town to preserve our family legacy land in perpetuity. And what's more, I see value for the town of Littleton to join us in this desired outcome. Good cue. From the 67 goals in Littleton's master plan, purchasing this land addresses no less than 9 of those goals. This acquisition will also reinforce the 7-year action plan for the Open Space and Recreation Committee. It will tie together contiguous green space from Long Lake all the way around to Oak Hill, another green belt. Furthermore, it will help in implementing environmental justice policy, as has been outlined in the Open Space Committee. Our family land also falls within the half-mile radius of the MBTA station here in the master plan and again in the work that's being done today. Combine that with all of the upcoming building downtown, and I venture to think that the town will be relieved to preserve some green space and natural character. From salamanders to crayfish to deer and all the species in between, we will preserve habitat for all of these creatures. And as deeply meaningful as all of this colonial history has always been for me, the sacred value of this land goes for centuries before our time. Following the Indigenous peoples presentation in this very room, I've been working with Dan Badillion and local experts Jim and Mary Gage to document the ceremonial stone landscape on our property. There's Dan, and Jim and Mary, who wrote the book on ceremonial stone landscapes, have been out and have created a very lengthy document. Along with preserving the land, we'll be seeking a conservation restriction to further protect and preserve over a dozen features on site that celebrate the sacred connection to this land. Before we ever arrived, the native Neshoba tribe created stone structures to celebrate the connection to the land and water found on our property. We would now seek to work with our town to preserve this land in perpetuity. For all these reasons, we would like to sell this land back to the town of Littleton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great.
So, in the packet, Amy has done a little bit of work. There are grants available. I forget the name of the grant now. It's BMP.
The land acquisition.
Land acquisition grant.
Land
grant. Yeah. So, we, which would pay up to $500,000 or something.
Mhm.
That,
That's what it says in the packet.
yeah. So we just need to allow Amy.
Can I?
Please, yeah, please come up and introduce yourself and be part of the conversation.
Amy Green, Conservation Agent. The land grant is the next grant to be coming available, and it would pay up to $500,000 or, but not more than 58% of the total cost. So if it's $1 million, theoretically, they could pay $580,000, but they only paid $500,000. So you balance between the two numbers. So that grant application is due in July, and then there's the Land and Water Conservation Fund application, which would be probably in December or January, if we didn't get the land grant, if we're trying for grants. And then potentially the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant, which is what we got for Browns. But I don't think we'd get another MVP grant so quickly.
Is that timelines, let's say July for the land grant, and then all of the shenanigans that go along with approving it at town meeting? Is that the timeline that would be acceptable to you?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My hope, we've been working on this for quite a while, but my hope would be that we would be able to get to the fall town meeting. So if that all falls together, that will work.
I see the assessment card says that the land value is just under $500,000. So I'm curious what you were asking and what the developers were offering.
So 10 lots in Littleton today, $250,000 to $300,000 a lot is $2.5 to $3 million.
Yep.
Of course, they have to put in the road too, so there's some work from that. And if we use the most recent precedent of buying the Browns Woods property, that's $50,000 an acre. There are 36 and a half acres there. 1.825 million is the quick math for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I see we have a member of CONSCOM. Chase, do you want to come and speak? And then we can discuss it at the board level. No, he can wait.
I wanted to, I'm sorry,
introduce
Chase Gerbic, Oak Ridge Road. I wanted to speak, I suppose, in the first part, as a member of the Conservation Commission, we discussed this property. We've asked Amy to essentially do anything that she can to help facilitate this in the context of understanding its value to the town, in terms of organizing the assessments and so on. I mean, we appreciate Mr. Webster's perspective here. We feel like the town and things needs their own independent, analysis, the ecological resources, prices, et cetera. And so in that regard, the Conservation Commission it's on our radar, and we've directed the conservation agent to really do whatever she can to both help you, to help the town administrator, and help the residents. Speaking independently of the Conservation Commission, I just wanted to touch on for a second the significance of this property from three perspectives. One is conservation. This land, from pure conservation perspective, is valuable, right? Large tracts of land are hard to get your hands on. But I'm not proposing that we investigate acquiring it solely for conservation purposes. It's also got substantial recreational purposes, as noted, proximity to the train station. And then, of course, there's the historical component of that. And I'm certainly not qualified to speak to the historical component, although my eyes can obviously see a 1700s farmhouse there, which seems interesting. And so, long story short, certainly whether or not the town acquires this land is a function of how much is it going to cost, how much money can we get our hands on from other sources. But a big part of that is, frankly, potentially putting a little bit of money up front to spend on the assessments that we need to do to acquire it. And as a taxpayer, I really want to see, to Mr. Sanders' point, us go get as many grants as possible, partner with as many conservation trusts as possible to help us go forward. But in order to do that, we need to come in with some information, and that's going to involve probably a small outlay of money from the town to make that possible. So I would very much appreciate your consideration to expend the resources necessary to investigate whether or not this is, in fact, a good opportunity for the town.
I just want to, and I'm not to put you on the spot, Mr. Finley, I'm curious if the Conservation Trust has discussed this with you, and/or if you have any input on this?
Yes. I can only say that I have toured the property, and it's wonderful. We're definitely supportive of it. And we will perhaps be able to come in financially with some things up front. We haven't talked about that yet, but it's very possible. But definitely, we're 100% supportive of the purchase of this property.
Potentially holding the restriction?
Yep.
Potentially.
We could, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
You want to start? Or?
I would say that I did walk this property. Obviously grew up close to there as well, but Mark and I walked the property with Mr. Webster, and Sudbury Valley Trust, I think, was with us. I mean, you were there. A unique lot that does have a pretty good stream running through it. Obvious signs of historical relevance with old wells and things throughout the property. It seems bigger when you're actually walking it. I think it's because it runs up against the end of Foster Street, the property what's the large complex that runs down to the water?
800 Foster.
Yes, thank you. So it just lends itself to a much broader space than you would imagine. And your family has kept some of the trails that go through there too, which help to navigate it. Yes, so I love the piece of land. It's scary because of where it's located, so close to the MBTA, so you're always wary of that, what potentially could happen there if we don't act on something like this. So I think I'm definitely a supporter in learning more about what we can do to acquire the parcel. I think it's a great piece of property.
Ms. Napoli?
Excellent. I agree with Mr. Wilson. I think we should definitely explore any resources that we can utilize to help preserve this property. Thank you, Mr. Webster.
Mr. DeCoste?
So, do your quick math for me again?
36 acres?
The most recent precedent is the Browns Woods, which we paid $50,000 an acre for. This is 36 and a half.
Team. That guy had a really good deal on it.
36 and a half, 1.825 million.
And the developer, it was roughly 2.5 million-ish for the if you broke it up into lots and sold the lots for a quarter million
So we'd be
each.
looking to use cluster zoning to be
Yeah.
able to consolidate the homes. 10 homes in Littleton today, a buildable lot, 250 to 300,000, 2.5 to $3 million. So I'd be looking to work with the town to get to the favorable point for everyone involved, and that number by immediate precedent is what I share with you, Mr. DeCosta.
Thank you.
I guess I would hope that we could put a coalition together like we did for the Brown property, yes.
Yeah, if I may, if you do want to proceed with this, especially if you want to go for a land grant, one of the first things to do is you're going to get the appraisal, which will nail down these off the back numbers. And that would also help someone like either SelBrd Valley trustees or the trust to know what is being asked, because it's not clear what's really the numbers that are going to be on there. I talked informally with an appraiser, and he didn't know the property, and I pushed him. He said, maybe $4,000 to $6,000 for an appraisal that would meet the land grant requirements, which is pretty much what the other appraisals have come in on.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would certainly be in favor of finding funding for that and moving forward with at least looking at this property, because I do think there are not many big chunks like this left.
You're looking like he's got money under the table.
Yeah, right? Anthony, to pocket Lynn?
Yeah, let's see. We can take a look around and see where we have some funds in the budget to do the appraisal, which is necessary.
Okay.
Can I also add that this property, as the development at the train station happens, becomes more valuable as there's no open space really over there. There's no walking trails over there. So this property lends itself very well to allowing those units walking trails in walking distance from their location, so.
Thanks.
Use the gas line.
So no action except for just starting to investigate, or is there a motion or not?
There was no motion proposed, but if the board, I think I'm hearing support from the board to move forward with finding the funds for the appraisal and working and getting that done, so we can certainly do that.
It sounds like there's general support for pursuing this.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, board.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, it's annual town meeting time.
Very excited about this.
I know, Anthony looks thrilled.
I just feel like it's been one perpetual town meeting since August, right? So Ryan's prepared the timeline for the annual town meeting, which will take place on Monday, May 1st, 2023. So tonight, the action that we're looking for is, the board has to vote to open the warrant, and then we'll start putting articles together and asking you to insert them over the next few meetings. Also, an opportunity now, too, to talk about some other potential articles, right? We just talked about electronic voting. I think somebody brought that up earlier, and if that's something that we want to explore in the future, the first step would be going to town meeting and making that an option to have electronic. Again, it wouldn't be probably available until the special in the fall, at the very earliest. So there may be other articles that we've talked about, and it's just not coming to the top of my head other than those, but now is the time.
So the deadline for voter petitioned zoning articles has already passed? And were there any?
No.
Okay. So I guess we're voting to open the warrant.
Well, the only thing, I'm sorry, before Chuck was eager to read that, another thing we did talk about, I think Cindy mentioned it, or Chuck, or somebody, or Gary, about we meet and we talk about town meeting before, both as a staff and as moderator, the chair of the select board and chair of FinCom, et cetera, to talk about other improvements that we could make to town meeting. One of the things that staff talked about is really exploring the possibility of moving town meeting from the middle school to the high school auditorium, which holds 700. So we're going to actually just kind of go over there and explore that and see if that's feasible. So when you're making this motion, Chuck, if you want to just do a TBD, or if you want to commit right now to the middle school, that's fine too. It's the board's preference. But it would certainly be something that we'd have to do relatively soon to explore that and see if we can recommend that to the board.
Can we just make the motion with a bunch of ors in there? Could do or Littleton High School gym, or the Littleton
But just
High School auditorium?
to location to be determined.
It wouldn't be the gym, we're talking the auditorium.
The auditorium, yes.
But if we do to be determined, then we have to, well, it could be the gym. I mean,
But why would you go
Why
to
not?
take another
Why
gym
not?
space? We have a gym.
Right, when we close the warrant, we'll update the motion to say the town meeting will be at wherever we decide, you decide.
Whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Or whatever, you can do or, whatever, however you want to put it.
You know the address of the high school?
Yeah, 56.
Or
56 King Street.
Or Indian Hill.
I think just to be determined would be the best.
Dirigible.
Incorrigible. Okay. Move the select board vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 39, Section 10, and Town Code, Section 41-1, to open the warrant for the Monday, May 1st, 2023 annual town meeting forthwith, and to close said warrant on Friday, March 24th, 2023 at noon. Said town meeting to be held at a location to be determined later.
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Mark. This is a roll call vote. Mr. Rombacher?
Aye.
Mr. DeCoste?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
Ms. Napoli?
Aye.
Chair is in favor. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all very much.
One quick question on that. You locked in a May 1st date. I know we just passed.
Yeah, so we have to stick with May 1st, because after this, the special, this has to go to the Attorney General's office, and we wouldn't have time to
flex
bring,
it if we
yeah,
had to.
so it wouldn't take place.
Certification.
Yeah,
Thank
till
you.
September.
Thank you.
And the second part about this is, if the board would like, and we can start working with town council to craft an amendment to our bylaw to allow for electronic voting.
Yep. You know, there was another, I think, what we were discussing, and Gary and I were discussing at the town meeting about the, the time sink of trying to edit zoning articles on the floor, and that perhaps could be either not banned, but can we insist that someone who wants to edit a zoning article brings it to town council before the meeting?
So we did discuss that too, and there are some communities, and Tom's doing some homework on this.
Okay.
There is some communities that say if you're going to propose an amendment to a zoning article, that it has to be
Submitted.
In
yeah,
writing?
in writing,
7 days or
something in
like that?
advance,
Okay.
so we can vet it and see how it impacts. You know, some of these motions that are made, you know, it impacts a lot of different areas within a zoning article. So, the planning board does spend, you know, months to try to bring something forward. So,
Okay.
he's exploring that, and we'll have something
Great.
soon. I'm
So
assuming.
that would be another article we would have to insert to take that
To
out?
amend the bylaw, yeah.
I wouldn't want to handcuff us. I would definitely want to add flexibility there where someone could amend it on the floor for very minor things, right? I mean, what if
Like,
wording is messed? I mean,
Yeah.
there's certain things that we don't want to get completely locked where we have
Well,
to
it's
go.
at the discretion of the moderator.
yeah.
Is it?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, there's Mr.
He's
Moderator.
here, so. Thank you.
So I don't know, Tim, if you know, we are explaining that we had our meetings, I don't know if you wanted to say anything and some of the stuff that we talked about.
Specific to the electronic voting?
With anything, you know, I know we talked about a lot of locations and et cetera, and I don't know if you had anything else to add.
Not so, I mean, I'm open to switching the location. You know, there were reasons why, you know, that the high school was off the list for many years, but, you know, I did different moderator now, different town clerk. It could be a whole different ballgame.
I imagine, if I may, I don't mean to interrupt you, Tim.
Yeah.
I'm going to. With the auditorium, if you've got somebody that's 9 seats in and they want to speak, it's, you know, kind of, excuse me, pardon me, to get to the microphone to be able to be heard. It's definitely much more comfortable, and that is something I think we need to take into consideration. But we might have to do some accommodations where we have some volunteers from the high school or something like that that are running microphones to
Right,
some
yeah.
seats, or, maybe we go every other row initially to give some space for people to bring the microphones in. So there's some logistics that I think we'd have to figure out. Another thing is if, I know that the town of Wenham used the electronic voting systems. If there's another community where we could do a test run,
Westford has them.
Westford, if we could borrow them from another community, and just maybe just 20 of them, just to show people how it works at town meeting, and take what is this red or is this blue? And it's a white piece of paper. That wouldn't work. We have one or two answers, right? I think that would be good just from a sales pitch standpoint, the PR.
Yeah, we could do some kind of presentation. It's all tied to a program, so we'd have to talk to the company and see what they'd be willing to allow us access to.
I
But
don't
we
want to
could
go a lot
do
of
that.
time. I'd literally just want to say this is something we're looking at, and
It's a short, really,
Yeah, do you like
2
vanilla
or
or do you
3
like
slides.
chocolate?
Right,
And then
that's it. It really moved town meeting along, and we used it
I
for
think
every
that-
article, and it worked well.
Use it for every article.
We used it for every
Did you,
article.
and you didn't do a consent calendar or anything like that?
We
Or
did,
consent
it
agenda?
still used the clickers, and
Yeah.
they were no bigger than probably your keychain, the remote on your car starter, so it was small, and it went seamless, it really did.
I don't know if Tim had anything before I cut him off.
Regain my train of thought. Well, no, just if the town is interested in pursuing electronic voting, and many towns have used ARPA funding, Anthony, it's a legitimate expense under the ARPA Act. And you also want to think about lease versus purchase. If you lease the system, the vendor is responsible for charging out 500 clickers, not the town clerk and not anybody in town hall. So there are reasons why you might want the vendor to be responsible for all that equipment. So it's just something to think about.
Yeah, we wouldn't even really pursue looking at vendors until we had the bylaw that would allow the option. Then we would be bringing something back after the town meeting to say, okay, here's different proposals that we received and
But
prices and
you
so
need an
forth.
appropriation, would you?
We need an appropriation, yeah.
Are there any other articles that we've been, that are potential at this time?
If you think of any, just shoot us an email. I know it's kind of getting late and that brain's are starting to fry a little bit, so.
Sounds good. All right, town administrator updates, 2 approvals for contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yes, these 2 contracts have directly have to do with Indian Hill. The goal is to bring an article for, renovations. When we're talking renovations, we're not talking anything really major that we don't see. We see it as being cosmetic, paint, some flooring, outside rotted boards, I think HVAC, et cetera.
Few
So,
partitions maybe inside.
yeah, we don't see anything as major, and when we're doing our due diligence, we're going through the process right now before we even have the closing, which is scheduled for March 31st. We're doing radon tests, we're doing Title V tests, we had the building looked at, we're doing our own environmental review, we're doing a test of the fire suppression system. So we have our work cut out for us between now and March 31st to make sure that all of the boxes are checked and that we believe that we're buying what we think we're getting. So with that, we could enter into these 2 contracts. Our LLB is very familiar going through it. We'd actually save some money working with them because of their familiarity. And then OP and Vertex has been working right around with us, and I think Chuck's ready for a motion.
Really? You can tell it?
Is there any any discussion prior to motion?
So can I ask, yeah, just because I actually read the proposals, but like LLB's talking about, their proposals, like how we're laying out the building, I thought that was already more or less decided.
It's not major laying out. I think like the school department wants to put a counter up at the top. We're not talking major renovations, and I'm not even, this is just to get us to the feasibility to get a dollar amount. We still now would have to go out to bid on a design of team. We can't just award it to LLB. So we can do it right now to get the dollar amount we need, but then we'll be going out, and LLB may not be the vendor that we end up going with.
Okay.
Okay. Go, go, go.
Move the select board vote to authorize the town administrator to enter into a contract for $13,674 with Vertex Companies Incorporated to provide owner's project management services for the feasibility study for 36 King Street.
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Cindy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries 5-0.
Move the select board vote to authorize the town administrator to enter into a contract for $29,600 with LLB Architects for the feasibility study of 36 King Street.
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Cindy. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you. All right, minutes. January 17th, January 24th, January 30th, February 4th, and February 13th. It's budget season minute time. I have to confess, my eyes crossed a bit at the end of this, but
I know.
I skimmed the last couple, but I didn't have any.
A lot of
I didn't
comments.
see any corrections, so if anyone else has any, speak now.
There was a typo somewhere in there, but I left my notebook where I wrote it down.
That's a lot of six.
Move the select board vote to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of February 13th, 2023, and the joint budget meetings of January 17th, 2023, January 24th, 2023, January 30th, 2023, and February 4th, 2023.
Second.
Motion made by Chuck, seconded by Mark. All those in favor, please say aye.
Did you say the 13th? Did you say February
Seven.
13th?
Yeah, he did say the 13th.
Before you adjourn.
Is there any other business?
Aye.
One,
That was the aye.
That was.
just a reminder, we'll update the board on the weather tomorrow. If in fact Town Hall was closed, that means the meeting tomorrow night would be canceled, and we have it rescheduled for Wednesday night.
That's the joint
Okay.
meeting with.
Yeah.
That's joint meeting with FinCom.
To
So
talk
we've
about
already.
the Department of Health.
Just to-
Right,
Okay.
right. So
And they're
we-
okay with that?
Yeah,
They
sure.
don't get to be okay with it or not.
FinCom?
Oh, FinCom knows about this.
Oh, okay, that was
We
the
talked
question,
to
not-
Tyler last week about when we saw the weather, we
Oh,
were
okay.
making alternate plans. We even had an alternate plan for tonight, because they were originally
Yes.
talking about the snow starting, so as soon as we know, I'll shoot an email to the board letting you know.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're done.
Be safe, folks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for the diehards.